am the national flag of the Commonwealth of Australia. I belong to you and every Australian equally and freely. I was conceived before the dawn of the century. Designed by Ivor Evans, I was chosen over and above some 32,000 contenders. Although I was never an orphan, I was adopted on that sparkling spring day, the 3rd of September 1901, when I flew above the exhibition building in Melbourne. I was hailed and celebrated by people standing on the threshold of nationhood. They took me to their hearts. In that official ceremony, in the presence of our first Prime Minister, I became the chief symbol of a new nation, embracing the ideals of self-determination, national sovereignty, and personal freedom under God. I have been hoisted aloft over many buildings, from humble homes to the Houses of Parliament. I have listened to every Prime Minister declare his allegiance to me, to our monarch, and to our Constitution. I have witnessed the pledge of each one to protect and defend those freedoms we all cherish, even above life itself. I am carried with pride in ceremonies and processions. I have draped the caskets of your national heroes, carried to their last resting place. The caskets of kings and queens, eminent statesmen, generals, admirals, humble privates, and the unknown soldier. Wherever free men gather, wherever there is justice, faith, hope, charity, and truth, there too am I. At the tender age of 14 years, I received my baptism of fire in World War I. I flew proudly in those early days as we heard the call to do battle alongside those of our own kin. I was carried up the steep hills of Gallipoli, and I was there with the men in the trenches. I watched Simpson bring out the wounded on his doughy little donkey. I breathed the dust of the deserts and rode in glory with the Light Horse Brigade. I saw our finest sons fall and lie still. In death, they had given their last full measure of devotion. The war was over for them forever, but I kept my lonely vigil over their graves and stayed to watch the flowers grow, amid the crosses, row upon row, in Flanders fields. Oh, young Australia, I was there with your fathers whom I longed to comfort. Look at me again, lest you forget. You know me by my distinctive emblems. The Union Jack is the tie that binds us to your ancestors and rich heritage down through the centuries. The upright red cross on a white field is the cross of St. George, patron saint of England. This cross was there when King John set his royal seal on Magna Carta in 1215. And it was there when Simon de Montfort brought together the very first Parliament in 1265, making England truly the mother of parliaments. I proudly wear two other crosses. The white diagonal cross on a blue field is the cross of St. Andrew, patron saint of Scotland. The red diagonal cross on a white field is the cross of St. Patrick, patron saint of Ireland. These three crosses, which perhaps you scarcely understand, unite our heritage in this wonderful land and forge our future in an inseparable bond. The blazing Southern Cross marks our way ahead, while the seven-pointed Federation Star joins our states and territories in a single yet united Commonwealth. All this set in a field of blue, the blue of our southern skies and of the endless ocean washing our golden sandy beaches and coral shores. We are the heirs to a culture rich and diverse. We are the offspring child of a great empire. We have a glorious tomorrow. We are one, lest you forget. I have been to many places. I have seen many things. With our explorers, I crossed the icy wastes of Antarctica, and climbed the heights of Mount Everest. I look down with pride on our mighty sportsmen and women as they win honors for their country all over the world. At every official or memorable event in this land, I hold the position of honor. Following World War I, we frolicked in our newfound liberty, growth, prosperity, increase, and our commonwealth. But far to the north, in Russia, a new tyranny spewed forth, slaughtering the rich and regal, the lowly and humble, usurping the sovereignty of nations, not of its own. We watched from afar, protected by the border of oceans. Then came 1939, and once again, we heard the beat of the warmongers' drums. Again, my heart went out to our brave soldiers, sailors, and airmen. I was there with them, in the Middle East, in New Guinea, Malaya, Borneo, and many other places. I was trodden in the mud, red with the blood of those brave young Australians, so ruthlessly murdered in prisoner of war camps, lest you forget. Finally, in 45, peace at last, so we thought. With just a few short years' rest, I was again carried into battle, caught up in further hostilities by those promoting war. I watched and praised the endurance and spirit of our volunteers in Korea. I too felt the sufferings of our brave sons and daughters in the forces in Vietnam, lest you forget. I'm well known and remembered in many places. I am flown every day in the school at Villers-Bretonneux in France, where grateful children and teachers do not forget their debt to Australian soldiers. I am many things to many people. To some, I am yesterday, today, and tomorrow, an inseparable link in the chain that binds men to God and country. And because I am on the side of God through our great heritage, there are the godless who seek to destroy me and replace those 3 Christian crosses with plants or animals. But they dare not. Why? Because today I am everywhere, in the homes of the humble and the mansions of millionaires. I am in the cities, the suburbs, and in country towns. From coast to coast, right across this great nation, I am raised with pride and dignity. Oh, my people, you have given so much to be Australian, and I am proud that we are one, bonded through trial and triumph. Look at me, and remember our heritage, and realize our great future. Together, we will grow, and all the world will know. You must never allow those who seek to reduce diversity into dust, to grind our treasures into a melting pot. And as you consider the future of your own true identity, remember, I was there in your every hour of loss, your every moment of glory. So too, I will be there in all your tomorrows. Though proud, loyal, and glorious through all my short history, there is one thing which I need you most of all. I cannot fasten myself to the flagstaff, lest you forget.
Fabian was excited as he once more rehearsed his speech for the crowd certain to turn up tomorrow. He had always wanted prestige and power, and now his dreams were going to come true. He was a craftsman, working with silver and gold, making jewelry and ornaments. But he became dissatisfied with working for a living. He needed excitement, a challenge, and now his plan was ready to begin. For generations, the people used the barter system. A man supported his own family by providing all their needs, or else he specialized in a particular trade. Whatever surpluses he might have from his own production, he exchanged or swapped for the surplus of others. Market day was always noisy and dusty, yet people looked forward to the shouting and waving, and especially the companionship. It used to be a happy place, but now there were too many people, too much arguing. There was no time for chatting. A better system was needed. Generally, the people had been happy and enjoyed the fruits of their work. In each community, a simple government had been formed to make sure that each person's freedoms and rights were protected and that no man was forced to do anything against his will by any other man or any other group of men. This was the government's one and only purpose, and each governor was voluntarily supported by the local community who elected him. However, market day was the one problem they could not solve. Was a knife worth 1 or 2 baskets of corn? Was a cow worth more than a wagon? And so on. No one could think of a better system. Fabian had advertised,
"I have the solution to our bartering problem, and I invite everyone to a public meeting tomorrow."
The next day, there was a great assembly in the town square, and Fabian explained all about the new system which he called money. It sounded good. "How are we to start?" the people asked.
"The gold, which I fashion into ornaments and jewelry, is an excellent metal. It does not tarnish or rust and will last a long time. I will make some gold into coins, and we shall call each coin $1."
He explained how values would work and that money would be really a medium for exchange, a much better system than bartering. One of the governors questioned, "Some people can dig gold and make coins for themselves," he said. "This would be most unfair." Fabian was ready with the answer.
"Only those coins approved by the government can be used, and these will have special markings stamped on them."
This seemed reasonable, and it was proposed that each man be given an equal number. "But I deserve the most," said the candlemaker. "Everyone uses my candles." "No," said the farmer. "Without food, there is no life. Surely we should get the most." And so the bickering continued. Fabian let them argue for a while, and finally he said,
"Since none of you can agree, I suggest you obtain the number you require from me. There will be no limit except for your ability to repay. The more you obtain, the more you must repay in 1 year's time."
"And what will you receive?" the people asked.
"Since I am providing a service, that is, the money supply, I am entitled to payment for my work. Let us say that for every 100 pieces you obtain, you repay me 105 for every year that you owe the debt. The 5 will be my charge, and I shall call this charge interest."
There seemed to be no other way, and besides, 5% seemed little enough charge.
"Come back next Friday, and we will begin."
Fabian wasted no time. He made coins day and night, and at the end of the week he was ready. The people were queued up at his shop, and after the coins were inspected and approved by the governors, the system commenced. The cautious borrowed only a few, and off they went to try the new system. They found money to be marvelous, and they soon valued everything in gold coins or dollars. The value they placed on everything was called a price, and the price mainly depended on the amount of work required to produce it. If it took a lot of work, the price was high, but if it was produced with little effort, it was quite inexpensive. In one town lived Alan, who was the only watchmaker. His prices were high because the customers were willing to pay just to own one of his watches. Then another man began making watches and offered them at a lower price in order to get sales. Alan was forced to lower his prices, and in no time at all, prices came down, so that both men were striving to get the best quality at the lowest price. This was genuine free competition. It was the same with builders, transport operators, accountants, farmers, in fact, in every endeavor. The customers always chose what they felt was the best deal. They had freedom of choice. There was no artificial protection such as licenses or tariffs to prevent other people from going into business. The standard of living rose, and before long, the people wondered how they had ever done without money. At the end of the year, Fabian left his shop and visited all the people who owed him money. Some had more than they borrowed, but this meant that others had less, since there were only a certain number of coins issued in the first place. Those who had more than they borrowed paid back each 100 plus the extra 5, but still had to borrow again to carry on. The others discovered for the first time that they had a debt. Before he would lend them more money, Fabian took a mortgage over some of their assets, and everyone went away once more to try and get those extra 5 coins which always seemed so hard to find. No one realized that as a whole, the country could never get out of debt until all the coins were repaid, but even then, there were those extra 5 on each 100 which had never been lent out at all. No one but Fabian could see that it was impossible to pay the interest. The extra money had never been issued. Therefore, someone had to miss out. It was true that Fabian spent some coins, but he couldn't possibly spend anything like 5% of the total economy on himself. There were thousands of people, and Fabian was only one. Besides, he was still a goldsmith, making a comfortable living. At the back of his shop, Fabian had a strong room, and people found it convenient to leave some of their coins with him for safekeeping. He charged a small fee depending on the amount of money and the time it was left with him. He would give the owner receipts for the deposit. When a person went shopping, he didn't normally carry a lot of gold coins. He would give the shopkeeper one of the receipts to the value of the goods he wanted to buy. Shopkeepers recognized the receipt as being genuine and accepted it with the idea of taking it to Fabian and collecting the appropriate amount in coins. The receipts passed from hand to hand instead of the gold itself being transferred. The people had great faith in the receipts. They accepted them as being as good as coins. Before long, Fabian noticed that it was quite unusual for anyone to actually call for their gold coins.
Here I am, in possession of all this gold, and I am still a hard-working craftsman. It doesn't make sense. Why, there are dozens of people who would gladly pay me interest for the use of this gold, which is lying here and rarely called for. It's true, the gold is not mine, but it is in my possession, which is all that matters. I hardly need to make any coins at all. I can use some of the coins stored in my vault.
At first he was very cautious, only loaning a few at a time, and then only on tremendous security. But gradually he became bolder, and larger amounts were loaned. One day, a large loan was requested. Fabian suggested,
Instead of carrying all these coins, we can make a deposit in your name, and then I shall give you several receipts to the value of the coins.
The borrower agreed, and off he went with a bunch of receipts. He had obtained a loan, yet the gold remained in the strong room. After the client left, Fabian smiled. He could have his cake and eat it too. He could lend gold and still keep it in his possession. Friends, strangers, and even enemies needed funds to carry out their businesses, and so long as they could produce security, they could borrow as much as they needed. By simply writing out receipts, Fabian was able to lend money to several times the value of the gold in his strong room, and he was not even the owner of it. Everything was safe so long as the real owners didn't call for their gold, and the confidence of the people was maintained. He kept a book showing the debits and credits for each person. The lending business was proving to be very lucrative indeed. His social standing in the community was increasing almost as fast as his wealth. He was becoming a man of importance. He commanded respect. In matters of finance, his every word was like a sacred pronouncement. Goldsmiths from other towns became curious about his activities, and one day they called to see him. He told them what he was doing, but was very careful to emphasize the need for secrecy. If their plan was exposed, the scheme would fail, so they agreed to form their own secret alliance. Each returned to his own town and began to operate as Fabian had taught. People now accepted the receipts as being as good as gold itself, and many receipts were deposited for safekeeping in the same way as coins. When a merchant wished to pay another for goods, he simply wrote a short note instructing Fabian to transfer money from his account to that of the second merchant. It took Fabian only a few minutes to adjust the figures. This new system became very popular, and the instruction notes were called checks. Late one night, the goldsmiths had another private meeting, and Fabian revealed a new plan. The next day, they called a meeting with all the governors, and Fabian began.
The receipts we issue have become very popular. No doubt most of you governors are using them, And you find them very convenient?
They nodded in agreement and wondered what the problem was.
Well, some receipts are being copied by counterfeiters. This practice must be stopped.
The governors became alarmed. What can we do? They asked.
My suggestion is this. First of all, let it be the government's job to print new notes on a special paper with very intricate designs, and then each note to be signed by the chief governor. We goldsmiths will be happy to pay the printing costs, as it will save us a lot of time writing out receipts.
The governors reasoned. Well, it is our job to protect the people against counterfeiters, and the advice certainly seems like a good idea. So they agreed to print the notes.
Secondly, some people have gone prospecting and are making their own gold coins. I suggest that you pass a law so that any person who finds gold nuggets must hand them in. Of course, they will be reimbursed with notes and coins.
The idea sounded good, and without too much thought about it, they printed a large number of crisp new notes. Each note had a value printed on it: $1, $2, $5, $10, etc. The small printing costs were paid by the goldsmiths. The notes were much easier to carry, and they soon became accepted by the people. Despite their popularity, however, these new notes and coins were used for only 10% of transactions. The records showed that the check system accounted for 90% of all business. The next part of his plan commenced. Until now, people were paying Fabian to guard their money. In order to attract more money into the vault, Fabian offered to pay depositors 3% interest on their money. Most people believed that he was re-lending their money out to borrowers at 5%, and his profit was the 2% difference. Besides, the people didn't question him, as getting 3% was far better than paying to have the money guarded. The volume of savings grew, and with the additional money in the vaults, Fabian was able to lend $200, $300, $400, sometimes up to $900 for every 100 in notes and coins that he held in deposit. He had to be careful not to exceed this 9-to-1 ratio, because 1 person in 10 did require the notes and coins for use. If there was not enough money available when required, people would become suspicious, especially as their deposit books showed how much they had deposited. Nevertheless, on the $900 in book figures that Fabian loaned out by writing checks himself, he was able to demand up to $45 in interest, which is 5% on $900. When the loan plus interest was repaid, which was $945, the $900 was cancelled out in the debit column, and Fabian kept the $45 interest. He was therefore quite happy to pay $3 interest on the original $100 deposited, which had never left the vaults at all. This meant that for every $100 he held in deposits, it was possible to make 42% profit, most people believing he was making only 2%. The other goldsmiths were doing the same thing. They created money out of nothing at the stroke of a pen, and then charged interest on top of it. True, they didn't coin money. The government actually printed the notes and coins and gave it to the goldsmiths to distribute. Fabian's only expense was the small printing fee. Still, they were creating credit money out of nothing and charging interest on top of it. Most people believed that the money supply was a government operation. They also believed that Fabian was lending them the money that someone else had deposited. But it was very strange that no one's deposits ever decreased when a loan was advanced. If everyone had tried to withdraw their deposits at once, the fraud would have been exposed. When a loan was requested in notes or coins, it presented no problem. Fabian merely explained to the government that the increase in population and production required more notes, and these he obtained for the small printing fee. One day, a thoughtful man went to see Fabian. "This interest charge is wrong," he said. "For every $100 you issue, you are asking $105 in return. The extra $5 can never be paid since it doesn't exist. Farmers produce food, industry manufactures goods, and so on, but only you produce money. Suppose there are only 2 businessmen in the whole country and we employ everyone else. We borrow $100 each, we pay $90 out in wages and expenses and allow $10 profit. That's our wage. That means the total purchasing power is $90 plus $10 twice is $200. Yet to pay you, we must sell our produce for $210. If one of us succeeds and sells all his produce for $105, the other man can only hope to get $95. Also, Part of his goods cannot be sold, as there is no money left to buy them. He will still owe you $10 and can only repay this by borrowing more. The system is impossible. The man continued, surely you should issue $105, which is $100 to me and $5 to you to spend. This way there would be $105 in circulation and the debt can be repaid. Fabian listened quietly and finally said,
Financial economics is a deep subject, my boy. It takes years of study. Let me worry about these matters, and you look after yours. You must become more efficient, increase your production, cut down on your expenses, and become a better businessman. I'm always willing to help in these matters.
The man went away, still unconvinced. There was something wrong with Fabian's operations, and he felt that his questions had been avoided. Yet most people respected Fabian's word. He is the expert. The others must be wrong. Look how the country has developed, how our production has increased. We must be better off. To cover the interest on the money they had borrowed, merchants were forced to raise their prices. Wage earners complained that their wages were too low. Employers refused to pay higher wages, claiming that they would be ruined. Farmers could not get a fair price for their produce. Housewives complained that food was getting too dear. And finally, some people went on strike, a thing previously unheard of. Others had become poverty-stricken, and their friends and relatives could not afford to help them. Most had forgotten the real wealth all around, the fertile soils, the great forests, the minerals, and cattle. They could only think of the money which always seemed so scarce, but they never questioned the system. They believed the government was running it. A few had pooled their excess money and formed lending or finance companies. They could get 6% or more this way, which was better than the 3% Fabian paid. But they could only lend out the money they owned. They did not have this strange power of being able to create money out of nothing by merely writing figures in books. These finance companies worried Fabian and his friends somewhat, so they quickly set up a few companies of their own. Mostly, they bought the others out before they got going. In no time, all the finance companies were owned by them or under their control. The economic situation got worse. The wage earners were convinced that the bosses were making too much profit. The bosses said that their workers were too lazy and weren't doing an honest day's work. And everyone was blaming everyone else. The governors could not come up with an answer, and besides, the immediate problem seemed to be to help the poverty-stricken. They started up welfare schemes and made laws forcing people to contribute to them. This made many people angry. They believed in the old-fashioned idea of helping one's neighbor by voluntary effort. These laws are nothing more than legalized robbery. To take something off a person against his will, regardless of the purpose for which it's to be used, is no different than stealing. But each man felt helpless and was afraid of the jail sentence which was threatened for failing to pay. These welfare schemes gave some relief, but before long the problem was back and more money was needed to cope. The cost of these schemes rose higher and higher, and the size of government grew. Most of the governors were sincere men, trying to do their best. They didn't like asking for more money from their people, and finally, they had no choice but to borrow money from Fabian and his friends. They had no idea how they were going to repay. Parents could no longer afford to pay teachers for their children. They couldn't pay doctors, and transport operators were going out of business. One by one, the government was forced to take these operations over. Teachers, doctors, and many others became public servants. Few obtained satisfaction in their work. They were given a reasonable wage, but they lost their identity. They became small cogs in a giant machine. There was no room for personal initiative, little recognition for effort, their income was fixed, and advancement came only when a superior retired or died. In desperation, the governors decided to seek Fabian's advice. They considered him very wise, and he seemed to know how to solve money matters. He listened to them explain all their problems, and finally he answered.
Many people cannot solve their own problems. They need someone to do it for them. Surely you agree that most people have the right to be happy and to be provided with the essentials of life. One of our great sayings is, all men are equal, is it not? Well, the only way to balance things up is to take the excess wealth from the rich and give it to the poor. Introduce a system of taxation. The more a man has, the more he must pay. Collect taxes from each person according to his ability, and give to each according to his need. Schools and hospitals should be free for those who cannot afford them.
He gave them a long talk on high-sounding ideals and finished up with,
Oh, and by the way, don't forget you owe me money. You've been borrowing now for quite some time. The least I can do to help is for you to just pay me the interest. We'll leave the capital debt owing. Just pay me the interest.
They went away, and without giving Fabian's philosophies any real thought, they introduced the graduated income tax. The more you earn, the higher your tax rate. No one liked this, but they either paid the taxes or went to jail. Merchants were forced once again to raise their prices. Wage earners demanded higher wages, forcing many employers out of business, or to replace men with machinery. This caused additional unemployment and forced the government to introduce further welfare and handout schemes. Tariffs and other protection devices were introduced to keep some industries going, just to provide employment. A few people wondered if the purpose of the production was to produce goods or merely to provide employment. As things got worse, they tried wage control, price control, and all sorts of controls. The government tried to get more money through sales tax, payroll tax, and all sorts of taxes. Someone noted that from the wheat farmer right through to the housewife, there were over 50 taxes on a loaf of bread. Experts arose and some were elected to government. But after each yearly meeting, they came back with almost nothing achieved, except for the news that taxes were to be restructured. But overall, the total tax always increased. Fabian began to demand his interest payments, and a larger and larger portion of the tax money was needed to pay him. Then came party politics. The people started arguing about which group of governors could best solve the problems. They argued about personalities, idealism, party labels, everything except the real problem. The councils were getting into trouble. In one town, the interest on the debt exceeded the amount of rates which were collected in a year. Throughout the land, the unpaid interest kept increasing. Interest was charged on unpaid interest. Gradually, much of the real wealth of the country came to be owned or controlled by Fabian and his friends, and with it came greater control over people. However, the control was not yet complete. They knew that the situation would not be secure until every person was controlled. Most people opposing the systems could be silenced by financial pressure or suffer public ridicule. To do this, Fabian and his friends purchased most of the newspapers, TV and radio stations, and he carefully selected people to operate them. Many of these people had a sincere desire to improve the world, but they never realized how they were being used. Their solutions always dealt with the effects of the problem, never the cause. There were several different newspapers, one for the right wing, one for the left wing, one for the workers, one for the bosses, and so on. It didn't matter much which one you believed in, so long as you didn't think about the real problem. Fabian's plan was almost at its completion. The whole country was in debt to him. Through education and the media, he had control of people's minds. They were able to think and believe only what he wanted them to. After a man has far more money than he can possibly spend for pleasure, what is left to excite him? For those with a ruling class mentality, the answer is power, raw power over other human beings. The idealists were used in the media and in government, but the real controllers that Fabian sought were those of the ruling class mentality. Most of the goldsmiths had become this way. They knew the feeling of great wealth, but it no longer satisfied them. They needed challenge and excitement, and power over the masses was the ultimate game. They believed they were superior to all others. It's our right and our duty to rule. The masses don't know what is good for them. They need to be rallied and organized. To rule is our birthright. Throughout the land, Fabian and his friends owned many lending offices. True, they were privately and separately owned. In theory, they were in competition with each other, but in reality, they were working very closely together. After persuading some of the governors, they set up an institution which they called the Money Reserve Centre. They didn't even use their own money to do this. They created credit against part of the money out of the people's deposits. This institution gave the outward appearance of regulating the money supply and being a government operation. But strangely enough, no governor or public servant was ever allowed to be on the board of directors. The government no longer borrowed directly from Fabian, but began to use a system of IOUs to the Money Reserve Centre. The security offered was the estimated revenue from next year's taxes. This was in line with Fabian's plan, removing suspicion from himself to an apparent government operation. Yet, behind the scenes, he was still in control. Indirectly, Fabian had such control over the government that they were forced to do his bidding. He boasted,
Let me control the nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws.
It didn't matter much which group of governors were elected. Fabian was in control of the money, the lifeblood of the nation. The government obtained the money, but interest was always charged on every loan. More and more was going out in welfare and handout schemes, and it was not long before the government found it difficult to even repay the interest, let alone the capital. And yet there were people who still asked the question, money is a man-made system. Surely it can be adjusted to serve, not to rule. But these people became fewer, and their voices were lost in the mad scrabble for the non-existent interest. The administrations changed, the party labels changed, but the major policies continued. Regardless of which government was in power, Fabian's ultimate goal was brought closer each year. The people's policies meant nothing. They were being taxed to the limit. They could pay no more. Now, the time was ripe for Fabian's final move. 10% of the money supply was still in the form of notes and coins. This had to be abolished in such a way as to not arouse suspicion. While the people used cash, they were free to buy and sell as they chose. They still had some control over their own lives. But it was not always safe to carry notes and coins. Checks were not accepted outside one's local community, and so a more convenient system was looked forward to. Once again, Fabian had the answer. His organization issued everyone with a little plastic card showing the person's name, photograph, and an identification number. When this card was presented anywhere, the storekeeper phoned the central computer to check the credit rating. If it was clear, the person could buy what he wanted up to a certain amount. At first, people were allowed to spend a small amount on credit, and if this was repaid within a month, no interest was charged. This was fine for the wage earner, but what businessman could even begin? He had to set up machinery, manufacture the goods, pay wages, etc., and sell all his goods and repay the money. If he exceeded 1 month, he was charged 1.5% for every month the debt was owed. This amounted to over 18% per year. Businessmen had no option but to add the 18% onto the selling price. Yet this extra money, or credit, the 18%, had not been loaned to anyone. Throughout the country, businessmen were given the impossible task of repaying $118 for every 100 they borrowed. But the extra $18 had never been created at all. Fabian and his friends increased their standing in society. They were regarded as pillars of respectability. Their pronouncements on finance and economics were accepted with almost religious conviction. Under the burden of ever-increasing taxes, many small businesses collapsed. Special licenses were needed for various operations, so that the remaining ones found it very difficult to operate. Fabian owned and controlled all of the big companies, which had hundreds of subsidiaries. These appeared to be in competition with each other, yet he controlled all of them. Eventually, all competitors were forced out of business. Plumbers, panel beaters, electricians, and most other small industries suffered the same fate. They were swallowed up by Fabian's giant companies, which all had government protections. Fabian wanted the plastic cards to eliminate notes and coins. His plan was that when all notes were withdrawn, only businesses using the computer card system would be able to operate. He knew that eventually some people would misplace their cards and be unable to buy or sell anything until a proof of identity was made. He wanted a law to be passed which would give him ultimate control. A law forcing everyone to have their identification number tattooed on their hand. The number would be visible only under a special light linked to a computer. Every computer would be linked to a giant central computer so that Fabian could know everything about everyone. The story you've read is, of course, fiction. But if you found it to be disturbingly close to the truth and would like to know who Fabian is in real life, a good starting point is a study on the activities of the English goldsmiths in the 16th and 17th centuries. For example, the Bank of England began in 1694. King William of Orange was in financial difficulties as a result of a war with France. The goldsmiths lent him £1.2 million, a staggering amount in those days, with certain conditions. A. The interest rate was to be 8%. It must be remembered that Magna Carta stated that the charging or collecting of interest was a serious crime. B. The king was to grant the goldsmiths a charter for the bank which gave them the right to issue or create credit out of nothing. Prior to this, their operations of issuing receipts for more money than they held in deposits was totally illegal. The charter made it legal. In 1694, William Paterson obtained the charter for the Bank of England. This explanation of how the banks operate was written in 1971 by Larry Hannigan, Australia. Now let's do some research. Encyclopaedia Britannica, 14th edition. Banks create credit. It is a mistake to suppose that bank credit is created to any extent by the payment of money into the banks. A loan made by a bank is a clear addition to the amount of money in the community. Lord Acton, Lord Chief Justice of England, 1875. The issue which has swept down the centuries, and which will have to be fought sooner or later, is the people versus the banks. Mr. Reginald McKenna, chairman of the Midland Bank in London, I am afraid that ordinary citizens will not like to be told that the banks can, and do, create and destroy money, and they who control the credit of the nation direct the policy of governments, and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people. Mr. Philip A. Benson, president of the American Bankers Association, June 8, 1939, said, "There is no more direct way to capture control of a nation than through its credit money system." Sir Denison Miller, during an interview in 1921, when he was asked if he, through the Commonwealth Bank, had financed Australia during the First World War for $700 million, replied, "Such was the case, and I could have financed the country for a further like sum had the war continued." Asked if that amount was available for productive purposes in this time of peace, he answered, yes. So how should a proper money system work? As a simple example, what happens when we want to build a bridge? First question, do we know how to build a bridge? Yes. 2. Do we have the materials to build it? Yes. 3. Do we have enough people producing food to feed the men while they are building the bridge? Yes. So how does money get into the project? If there is work to be done, and the material is available and the labour willing, all we have to do is create the money, which really is as simple as credit for work done. Credit can be in the form of a ledger column, or even printed tickets. We may even call them dollars. Ask yourself why depressions have happened. The labour was still available. The work to be done was still there. The materials had not disappeared, and goods were readily available in the shops, or could be produced, except for the want of money. All that went missing from the community was the money to buy goods and services. So why did the money supply dry up? Here is a letter written by the Rothschilds brothers of London to a New York firm of bankers on the 25th of June, 1863. It reads, "The few who can understand the system, check money and credits, will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favours that there will be no opposition from that class. While on the other hand, the great body of people mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system will bear its burdens without complaint, and perhaps without even suspecting that the system is inimical, that is, hostile, hurtful, to their interests." The following quotation was reprinted in the Idaho Leader, USA, the 26th of August 1924, and has been read into Hansard twice, by John Evans MP in 1926, and by M.D. Cowan MP in the session of 1930 to 1931. In 1891, a confidential circular was sent to American bankers and their agents containing the following statements. "We authorize our loan agents in the western states to loan our funds on real estate, to fall due on September 1st, 1894, and at no time thereafter. On September 1st, 1891, we will not renew our loans under any consideration. On September 1st, we will demand our money. We will foreclose and become mortgagees in possession. We can take 2/3 of the farms west of the Mississippi, and thousands of them east of the Great Mississippi as well, at our own price. We may as well own 3/4 of the farms of the west and the money of the country. Then the farmers will become tenants, as in England. The understanding of this issue of money into the community can be best illustrated by equating money in the economy with tickets in a railway system. The tickets are printed by a printer who is paid for his work. The printer never claims the ownership of the tickets, and we can never imagine a railway company refusing to give passengers seats on a train because it's out of tickets. By this same token, a government should never refuse people the access to normal commerce and trade by claiming it's out of money. Suppose the government borrows $10 million. It only costs the bankers a few $100s to actually produce the funds, and a little more to do the bookkeeping. Do you think it's fair that our citizens should struggle to keep their homes and families together while the bankers grow fat on these profits? Credit created by a government-owned bank is better than credit created by private banks because there's no need to recover the money from people by way of taxes, and there's no interest attached to inflate the cost. The public work completed with the credit by the government bank is the asset that replaces the money created when the work is finished. None of our problems will disappear until we correct the creation, supply, and circulation of money. So what keeps the banking system going? Suppose you are a fairly successful private businessman and you want to expand. So you take a loan or overdraft of $10,000 from your local bank. Things go well for a while and you have paid back $5,000 or half the loan. But things go wrong and you have to tell the bank that you can no longer keep up the payments on the outstanding principal and interest. The $5,000 you cannot, will not, or have not repaid remains in circulation as interest-free money for other debtors to use to pay the interest and principal on their loans. It is this money from defaulted loans that enables the system to keep going. Of course, the banks say they don't want that to happen, but in reality, they can now foreclose on your real assets for something they gave only bookkeeping credit on. Whenever the debts increase beyond a certain point, orders go out to banks to refuse further credit, and then they foreclose on certain outstanding loans. So who gets foreclosed and why? Governments are never foreclosed. If it's necessary to eliminate a government that becomes hostile to those controlling the banking system, it's accomplished through war and revolution. Large corporate bodies are generally left alone, as they are necessary in the coming world government rather than individual countries. Foreclosures are nearly always directed against those who are the smallest and least organized to resist, such as the small businessman, the homeowner, and especially the family farmers. They can be handled with the least trouble. In order to keep Israeli, the communist nations, and international usury banking going, small businesses must be foreclosed. Western governments give away billions of dollars in foreign aid, while thousands of farmers and small businesses are cruelly foreclosed every month. So when we pay our taxes, this is what it's all about. Those persons who now rule and control the world foreclose heavily on the small homeowner, business people, and especially the farmers who want to make their own decisions and take their own consequences. They do not usually research history and the economic situation, but they feel justified in borrowing what they need from the banks. But in times of good farm prosperity, it's the bankers who encourage these loans. Those who run the banking system know that farmers and small business people are the most independent people in the nation. They are encouraged to get into debt, so foreclosure can be enforced to kill their independence. When you plant 1 grain of corn, it will yield an increase of several hundred grains. This is God's gift of increase. Animals also produce increase, but money, in any form, cannot increase. Yet people believe it does, and today, many people live off interest. Money is a great system, far superior to barter. Creating money to equate the real wealth of a nation or giving credit to an individual is not the problem. It is the charging of interest that is the root cause of all our economic problems. We are told that all nations are in debt. Ask yourself, or any politician, if all nations are in debt, who is the creditor? Thou shalt not lend upon usury, interest, to thy brother, interest on the money, or on anything that is lent with interest. Deuteronomy 23:19. He that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent, he that doeth these things shall never be moved. Psalm 15:5.
Past, present and future. Conspiracy, one of the darkest words in human history. British Chancellor Reginald McKenna was also chairman of the Midland Bank in London. In 1924 he said,
I am afraid that ordinary citizens will not like to be told that the banks can and do create and destroy money, and they who control the credit of the nation direct the policy of governments and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people.
For the past 300 years, men of different nationalities and many religious and non-religious backgrounds have joined forces and gained control over the world's money systems. They have established a superstructure of hidden power. These super-rich families are known as the international bankers. The key to their success has been to control and manipulate the money system of a nation while letting it appear to be controlled by the government. The net effect is to create money out of nothing, lend it to the government and then collect interest on it. A rather profitable transaction to say the least. Encyclopedia Britannica, 14th edition.
Banks create credit. It is a mistake to suppose that bank credit is created to any extent by the payment of money into the banks. A loan made by a bank is a clear addition to the amount of money in the community.
Lord Acton, Lord Chief Justice of England, in 1875 said,
The issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner or later is the people versus the banks.
Dr. Coombs was Governor of the Australian Reserve Bank and financial advisor to every Prime Minister, Liberal and Labor, for nearly 30 years. In a speech at Queensland University in 1954, he said,
Any given piece of expenditure can be financed from one of four sources or a combination of these sources. New savings, accumulated reserves, money borrowed other than a bank, money borrowed from a bank. The last source differs from the first three because when money is lent by a bank, it passes into the hands of the person who borrows it without anybody having less. Whenever a bank lends money, there is therefore an increase in the total amount of money available.
October 78, Review, a monthly magazine from the Bank of New South Wales, makes it quite clear that banks create money.
For example, if a bank wishes to purchase a government bond in the market, it makes payment for it by crediting the seller's bank, thus increasing total bank deposits. The largest proportion of bank assets is in overdrafts and loans. When a banker grants a customer credit by overdraft, the bank opens an account in its books and gives the client the right to draw funds without first having to put money into the account. But bank deposits only increase when the customer actually draws on the account to pay his creditors.
In Australia, we have an institution known as the Reserve Bank, which began as a semi-government operation. Here is a quote from its own publication.
The Reserve Bank has been banker to the Australian government since 1913. It is also banker to most of the state governments and a few large government instrumentalities.
Most of the money spent by the government is borrowed from the Reserve Bank, so the government debt is the initial loan plus interest. Some people still believe that the Reserve Bank is run by the government, but here again from the Reserve Bank's own publication.
The Reserve Bank Act came into operation on the 14th of January 1960, and from that date the bank has been a completely separated central bank with its own board, governor and staff.
The idea is to make it appear that the government controls the Reserve Bank, but in effect the Reserve Bank controls the government. Now, how has this come about? The Magna Carta was one of the most magnificent documents ever written by man. Being based on the Bible, in essence it said,
You have the right to do as you wish, to succeed or to fail, whichever you choose, but you may not interfere with the rights of others to do the same.
regarding money, it stated,
Anyone who charges or receives interest will be put to death.
obviously this was not popular with certain moneylenders. About 1690, King William was short of money as a result of a war with France. Despite the law, the moneylenders demanded interest on a loan to the king. How could he pay it back? Increased taxes, of course. Does that sound familiar? The moneylenders also forced him to pass a law allowing them to set up a bank with exclusive power to create money out of nothing. Through this conspiracy, England's entire money system fell into private hands. In 1694, William Paterson obtained the charter for the Bank of England. In a boastful mood, Paterson said,
The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies, which it creates out of nothing.
You might ask,
What's wrong with the banking system creating money?
for every $100 million they create out of nothing and lend to people and governments at, say, 10%, an additional $10 million is added to the debt every year. Where will the extra $10 million come from? Whatever your answer may be, the money for the interest does not exist. It will have to be created by a bank somewhere, and they will charge interest on that as well. The present structure of banking guarantees that every nation will always be in debt, and governments, good or bad, will be held to ransom by the bankers. Taxation in Australia in the early 1920s was only 2.5%. Today, direct and indirect taxation takes more than 50 cents out of every honest dollar that a person earns. And remember, this is to pay interest on money created out of nothing. Go into a modern bank and ask for a loan. You probably believe that the money or credit that you obtain is taken from other people's savings or fixed deposits. This is simply not true. Has your bank manager ever notified you that he has lent some of your money to someone else and now you have less money in the bank? Banks never lend the money they hold in deposits. All loans and overdrafts are new money created out of nothing at the stroke of a pen. They then charge interest on top. Very profitable. Banks offer interest on deposits as a smokescreen to disguise their operations. This book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, is an excellent starting point for understanding the operations of the world's money power structure and how the international bankers have set up a conspiracy to create a one-world rulership. It was a conspiracy that directed Brutus against Caesar in the Roman Senate on the Ides of March. It was a conspiracy that organised the assassination of President Lincoln in 1865. History is full of accounts of assassinations, secret combines, palace plots and betrayals over the centuries. Yet, despite this clear record, an amazing number of people scoff at the possibility of conspiracy. This segment is to show that the conspiratorial view of history, and especially recent history, is the correct view, and that there are secret and powerful combines at work today.
Power brokers in secret talks.
Each year, a top-secret meeting known as the Bilderberg Conference is attended by the richest and most powerful men on earth. This group has produced the last 3 American presidents, the last 3 prime ministers of Britain, the president of France, and chancellor of West Germany. So let's see what this is all about. Bavaria, 1786. Acting on a tip from an informer, police raided the home of a prominent attorney named von Zwack. They seized documents and letters revealing that he was a high-ranking member of an extensive conspiracy called the Order of the Illuminati. Over the centuries, different forms of the word Illuminati, meaning the enlightened ones, have been used by many secret lodges and occult organisations. Most were primarily concerned with psychological and spiritual objectives, a proclaimed inner wisdom and mind mastery of the secrets of the universe. The conspiracy exposed in Bavaria, however, was entirely different. This Illuminati was founded by Adam Weishaupt on May 1st, 1776. He had been a student of the Jesuits, but he rebelled and started his own group in opposition. Weishaupt wanted to establish a world order. In his Illuminati, there are 8 levels from the outermost novice inwards to Rex or King. The king, of course, was Weishaupt himself, who had adopted the code name Spartacus. Weishaupt's followers were merely puppets enticed into front organisations. Today, people with a sincere desire to improve the world are attracted to welfare schemes and world brotherhoods. But Weishaupt said,
These good folks swell our numbers and fill our money box. Set yourselves to work. These gentlemen must be made to nibble at the bait, but this sort of people must always be made to believe that the grade they have reached is the last.
But by the time a member had reached the level of presbyter or priest, the oath of absolute secrecy had become deadly serious. Only then was he allowed to see the real goal. It was the destruction of Christianity and religion to be replaced by humanism, the worship of reason. They, the enlightened ones, must destroy all independent governments and usher in a new world order, a one world government. Some people call it the New Age. The Illuminati attracted many prominent men, both in government and finance, including the Rothschilds, who originally financed Adam Weishaupt. Some years later, an obscure intellectual named Karl Marx joined one of the front organisations which was known as the League of the Just. It later changed its name to the Communist League. In 1847, Marx was hired to write their policy statement for the public. It was called the Communist Manifesto. On the surface, the manifesto appealed to the workers of the world to rise up against their so-called capitalist exploiters, but it should be noted that the project was financed by a wealthy man, Friedrich Engels. Marx was considered so unimportant that his name didn't appear on the manifesto during the first 20 years of its publication. This information is available in old history books and encyclopedias. You won't find it in later editions where history has been rewritten. Here is a current edition. It's available in most left-wing bookshops. Karl Marx listed a 10-point program for taking over a nation.
Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes.
That is, the government will own your home and you will pay rent.
A heavy progressive or graduated income tax.
That is, if you are productive, you will be victimised.
Abolition of all right of inheritance.
If you have worked and been careful, your savings will be confiscated by the government.
Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels.
By Marx's definition, you are a rebel if you are opposed to compulsory socialism.
Centralisation of credit in the hands of the state.
So there you have it. Get control of the nation's money system. All nations have a central bank. We have the International Monetary Fund and a World Bank. All this has happened in the last few decades.
Centralisation of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state.
We already have government railways, government shipping, Australia Post, Telecom.
Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. Equal liability of all to labour. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries.
Complete government control and ownership of all industry and production. You will have no say in who you work for, and certainly you won't be able to work for yourself.
Free education for all children in public schools.
Education is not free. Who pays for it? The government does, with your money. And government bureaucrats decide what your children will be taught. In many schools today, children are encouraged to study astrology and witchcraft under the guise of English lessons. Hard to believe? Get the tape on this subject.
60 years of communism and 100 million graves. Their discipline is to kill.
From 1831 to 1916, the so-called tyrannical czars executed only 997 people in 85 years. After the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, almost 2 million people were murdered in the first 6 years of their so-called liberation, and that was just the beginning. After 60 years, over 100 million people have been murdered.
Despite the concrete, the barbed wire, the savage dogs and merciless guards, East Germans keep on coming. The dash for freedom has never been harder, but East Germans continue to risk being shot, blown up, electrocuted and savaged by dogs to escape to the west.
Why does this so-called workers' paradise need barbed wire and bullets? The International Committee for the Defence of Human Rights reveals at least 200 forced labour camps currently in the Soviet Union. In Hungary and Poland, many of these man-proof enclosures were formerly lion parks and zoos close to major cities. Half the world is already under compulsory socialism. Let's see what's happening elsewhere. In recent years, we have seen the growth of an organisation called the World Council of Churches. Courier Mail, August 78, describes how this organisation has raised money from churches and used it to aid terrorists around the world. Millions of people are financially supporting this organisation. How many would continue to do so if they understood its origin and purpose?
Churches confirm guerrilla support. The World Council of Churches says its controversial grants to guerrillas in southern Africa are justified.
Here are some of the grants they had made to revolutionary groups up to 1971. Today, revolution is a multi-million-dollar business. Much of it is being financed by the World Council of Churches. Where does the money go that you put on the plate? Key figures behind the World Council of Churches include renegade ministers, lecturers trained in Moscow, sponsors of communist organisations and publications, and others with leanings towards atheistic socialism and a one-world government. The World Council of Churches claims to be Christian, yet many anti-Christian religions belong to it, even the Church of Satan. The World Council of Churches is an Illuminati front designed to water down Christianity and coerce people into a one-world religion. Another front organisation of the Illuminati is the American CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. It is through this organisation and outwards through tax-exempt foundations, universities and government agencies that the Illuminati has dominated the United States for over 60 years. In Harper's Magazine, July 58, there was an article entitled School for Statesmen, written by CFR member Joseph Kraft. At the time of writing the article, Kraft boasted that the CFR membership included
the President, the Secretary of State, the Chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, the Director of the CIA, the Board Chairman of 3 of the country's 5 largest industrial corporations, 2 of the 4 richest insurance companies, and 2 of the 3 biggest banks, plus the senior partners of 2 of the 3 leading Wall Street law firms, the publishers of the 2 biggest news magazines and of the country's most influential newspaper, and the presidents of the big 3 in both universities and foundations, as well as a score of other college presidents and a scattering of top scientists and journalists.
Here is a cabinet meeting when Johnson was president. We see the Postmaster General, Ministers of Agriculture, Labour, Health, Education, Welfare, people from the Treasury and the United Nations Ambassador. Practically all the men here are CFR members. Most people have never heard of the CFR, yet it is the unseen government of the United States. This is an American $1 note. On the left is a symbol of the Illuminati. Apparently it was taken by Adam Weishaupt from the occult symbolism of ancient history. This symbol is also used by the Freemasons, the Jesuits, the Rosicrucians and similar organisations. It looks rather unusual, doesn't it? A pyramid without a capstone, an eye in a triangle. Today the Illuminati appears to be controlled by the richest families in the world. Rothschild, Rockefeller, Warburg, Ford, Morgan, Schroeder, Baring, Hembros, Bosch and the Dutch royal family. These people own the world's banking systems. They control most of the world industries. Example, Bayer Aspirin, Ford Motor Company, General Electric, General Motors, ICI, IBM, Kmart, Shell. At the bottom you see the words, the Great Seal, but this is not the seal of the United States. The Latin words above the seal mean
a new world order.
At the bottom of the pyramid you see the Roman numerals for 1776. This of course is the year of American independence. But is it a coincidence that it is also the year that Adam Weishaupt established the Illuminati, 1776? Around the world, communists, socialists and trade unionists celebrate May 1st. People in witchcraft celebrate May 1st. Satan worshippers celebrate May 1st. The Illuminati was founded on May 1st. Coincidence? Or is there some common bond linking these organisations? Tapes are available on this subject. How many people in the May Day marches know what they're really celebrating? Here is David Rockefeller, chairman of the board of the CFR. The enormous wealth of the Rockefeller family has been accumulated by the simple process of owning most of the banks, including the Federal Reserve Bank in America. They also own the Chase Manhattan Bank, which is banker to the United Nations, and they own a surprising percentage of shares in our Australian banks. They control a large part of the world's industries, but more importantly, they control education through their tax-free foundations. They finance the Curriculum Development Centre in Canberra, which supplies textbooks and programs to most Australian schools. On the right is a list of some of the media they control. They own most of the daily newspapers in America and 2 of the big TV networks, NBC and CBS. It would take pages to list all the newspapers, magazines, radio, TV and movie companies controlled by the Rockefellers. But the Rockefeller empire is only a baby compared with the Rothschilds. Here is where the Rothschilds fit in, or should we say where everyone fits in with the Rothschilds. It was Lord Rothschild who said,
"Give me control of a nation's money and I care not who makes its laws."
What that really means is,
let the nation's leaders play their political party games, but when it comes to money, they will do as I tell them.
another front organisation of the Illuminati began in 1883, founded by Sidney Webb and George Bernard Shaw. This stained glass window is in the Webb's home in England. It depicts Sidney Webb and George Bernard Shaw on the right, reshaping the world. These 2 men set out to achieve world control by subversion and infiltration into government and finance. Let's look at that coat of arms above the globe. FS, the Fabian Society. See the wolf in sheep's clothing? Obviously, these men were deliberately using falsehood and deceit to achieve their goal. The Fabian Society has a lot of influence and control in Australia. For example, most of the Labor Party chiefs are members of the Fabian Society. They're quite open about their plans to get rid of the states and socialise Australia. In 1901, the states created the federal government and gave it limited powers in certain fields such as trade and defence. But over the years, men seeking centralised power have abused the Constitution, so the central government now has power over the very states which formed it. Bob Hawke wants to abolish the states and introduce complete socialism. He is a member of the Fabian Society, but did you know Bob Hawke was on the Reserve Bank Board until 1981? Remember the meaning of Lord Rothschild's statement?
Let the nation's leaders play their political party games, but when it comes to money, they will do as I tell them.
The Reserve Bank Board tells Prime Ministers what to do. This is why, over the years, governments change, party labels change, but major policies do not. Most federal politicians and top public servants are members of either the Fabian Society or the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Australian equivalent of the American CFR. The Bulletin, October 78.
David Rockefeller, chairman of the Chase Manhattan Bank, financier extraordinaire and member of the famous family, is to be Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser's personal guest in Canberra next month.
That was in November 78. In October 81, David Rockefeller came to Australia, this time with former KGB agent Henry Kissinger. Do you think that this team of bankers had anything to do with the mergers of the Australian banks? Remember Karl Marx's point 5?
Get control of a nation's money system.
Whoever controls our money system will control our resources.
Incidentally, the ANZ and the Wales are two of the 5 most profitable banks in the top 150 in the world.
Western nations consistently give away millions of dollars in grants and subsidise exports to communist nations. This book, National Suicide, documents the food, military equipment and technology flowing into Russia for decades.
The Russian war machine fed on American wheat, Western credits and technology.
In 1981, Poland owed $80 billion to private American banks. The banks appealed to the federal government for assistance because Poland was bankrupt. Naturally, the federal government paid the bill, and now American taxpayers are forced to pay a further $80 billion plus interest. It is well documented in government statistics and other publications that since 1917, communism has survived only because of massive support from Western governments using taxpayers' money. Now the big question is why? Why would rich men and some Western politicians support a system of communism or socialism which would appear to be the path to their own destruction? The real issue is not capitalism versus communism as they would have us believe. It is government-protected capitalism which finances communism. The purpose is to eliminate free enterprise. After a man has far more money than he can possibly spend on pleasure, what is left to excite him? For those with the ruling class mentality, the answer is power, raw power over other human beings. Money can buy such power, but only to a point. After that, the name of the game is politics, and world politics is the ultimate game. These men are not truly capitalists in the classical sense of the word. They are rich socialists. They have gained their vast wealth by the gigantic fraud of the money system and monopolies. Monopolies can only exist with government protection to restrict and eliminate competition. Money alone does not motivate them. Many of them sincerely believe that a one world government is for mankind's benefit, but they have the expectation that from behind the scenes they will be the ones to rule. Big government is the conspiracy's life force. They want everyone working for the government or dependent on the government. But how do you sell big government to a people like us? In revolutionary terms, the tactic is known as pressure from above and pressure from below. Deliberately create problems, especially economic problems, and then offer solutions which will result in greater government control. If those who seek world control can organise mob violence, strikes, shortages, and also provide extensive news coverage, we will all throw our hands in the air and say, why doesn't the government do something? And what always follows? Yes, increased government power through new laws, supposedly to cope with the problem. Over the years, we have given huge grants to communist nations and equipped them with weapons and technology, so we have the constant threat of war. This is the meaning of pressure from above and pressure from below. Nationwide problems of unemployment, union unrest and inflation are deliberately engineered so that we will demand more government control of the economy. In the same way, the global threat of World War III is used to pressure us into accepting a one world government as our only solution. The United Nations, one world police force, one world army, one world church, one world government. Conspiracies have deceived many people so well that they even laugh at the idea of any conspiracy. Some people would never admit to having been deceived, but there are conspiracies which have been cleverly programming the world for decades. We are told that world inflation is a serious problem. All the nations are deeply in debt. We are told that the world is running out of food, resources and fossil fuels. And yet, millions of fertile acres in many countries are not being used for food production. People are forced to leave their farms and crowd into cities to earn a living. The world is not overpopulated, just the cities. In 1967, solutions to world problems were suggested by an organisation called the Club of Rome. We are led to believe that this group of bankers, economists, ecologists and humanists is a collection of rather harmless fanatics. In 1972, they published a book, The Limits to Growth, Doomsday Predictions for Earth. They claim that every possible step must be taken to save mankind. Why is it called the Club of Rome? Is it because it's led by Italians or Catholics? No, it's not very keen on churches at all. The club was formed on a private estate outside Rome. The estate is owned by David Rockefeller. At the top, you see that David Rockefeller is chairman of the board of the CFR. On the lower right is Carol Wilson, one of the directors. Carol Wilson is also on the executive committee of the Club of Rome, so the CFR links the Illuminati directly to the Club of Rome. This report was not easy to obtain. It is an outline of their ideas on how they think the world should be run. They have used mighty computers to analyse the world's problems from every conceivable angle, and they have come up with a computer solution to save us all. Here is one way the state planners gather information. A special library in Brisbane stores information from a Landsat satellite. They photograph geographic features, mineral reserves, towns and buildings, very useful for map making. But today,
officials at NASA and the Kremlin are getting a lovely little album together with snapshots of Australians going about their business. This latest threat to our privacy comes in the form of advanced satellites carrying powerful cameras which can focus on a golf ball while 160 kilometres above the Earth's surface.
Later on, we'll see just how far computer technology has progressed and how all this information about each of us is to be used. Here is Dr. Aurelio Pache, head of the Club of Rome. He says we must take a global approach. A new international order must be established, not only in the economic sphere, but also in social and political areas. At a meeting in Melbourne, Dr. Pache was asked,
"How many countries does your group advise?"
He snapped back the reply,
Many. Next question.
Dr. Pache, you advocate a new world order. How do you intend to get the power or authority?
Dr. Pache paused for a moment and said,
We're going to use shock therapy to get the people to accept it. I'm sorry, but you'll have to give up democracy if the planet is to survive.
the solution in his eyes is one of a benevolent dictatorship. Dr. Pache declined to explain shock therapy. In this book, Mankind at the Turning Point, the Club of Rome makes no bones about their intention. They plan to reorganise the whole world system, right down to maximum and minimum wages, where you live, what work you do, the size of your family, and everything else they think is for your own good. Here are some more of their books. Rio, that is Reshaping the International Order, is their textbook on how they intend to run the world. They put forward some very convincing arguments. They believe that they, the academics, the enlightened ones, must look after mankind. Many people in the Club of Rome and its front organisations are sincere. They really believe that they know what is best for the masses. We live in the greatest productive era that mankind has ever known. Australia could almost feed the world by itself if the farmers were allowed to produce without government interference. Production is not the problem. Telegraph, September 78.
More than 500,000 laying hens are to be killed to force up the price of eggs. The mass slaughter has been ordered by the New South Wales Egg Board as part of a scheme to reduce production.
The Egg Board, the Wheat Board, the Fish Board and so on are designed to restrict free enterprise and eliminate competition. This is point 7 of Karl Marx's plan to bring a country under socialism. This book, I Want the Earth Plus 5%, explains how and why power is exercised over everyone through the money system. There is nothing wrong with money itself. It is the present mathematically impossible system which gives power. You've heard the saying,
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
there is no man in this audience, in this country, or on this earth who could be trusted as a world ruler. Even when they use computers, human beings make mistakes. no matter how sincere their intentions may be. I wouldn't trust this man, I wouldn't trust you, I wouldn't trust me with the kind of power that they will have. Nevertheless, through the Club of Rome, the Illuminati intends to establish a world rulership. They have divided the world into 10 regions. Region 4 includes Australia, New Zealand, Oceania, South Africa and Israel. Why Israel? Why does Bob Hawke make so many trips to Israel? The Club of Rome calls this their computer model. The 10 regions are practically in order now. Region 8 in Africa is to be a blacks-only area. When the white population has finally been removed from that region, the model will be complete. The system is designed to bring law and order, so that no one, and we mean no one, will be able to buck the system. Through the Club of Rome, the Illuminati is about to take over the world and run it their way, and people who don't understand what's happening and what is really behind it will hand the world over without a second thought. Remember Dr. Pache said he was going to use shock therapy? In the next part, we'll investigate Dr. Pache's shock therapy and we'll see how it's already being applied. This is the observatory at Mount Bickley in Western Australia. It's on permanent loan to us from NASA, apparently part of Operation Planet Watch to observe planetary orbits. Man has looked at the heavens for centuries and wondered at the beauty. We have an inbuilt desire to explore the heavens, so let's imagine ourselves on a trip to the moon. 3, 2, 1. Here is a view of New South Wales above Sydney and Gosford. Here is a view from space. Astronauts have been enthralled by the sheer beauty of creation. The moon is only 240,000 miles from Earth. It's a majestic sight, but remember in the first segment about the blackness of space? There is no atmosphere on the moon to magnify the stars. You cannot see them without a telescope. Here is Earthrise as seen while orbiting the moon. Again you will notice no stars. The module is on its way for landing on the moon's surface. Here is the surface of the moon just before touchdown. The astronaut prepares to step onto the moon. Here's some good news for Weight Watchers. On the moon, a 12-stone person would weigh only 2 stone. A few missions later, this moon buggy was brought along for the astronauts to travel around. This astronaut is alone, a long way from home. One day, we may have moon bases like this. Our science fiction television shows would have us believe that they are only a few years away. We're in the age of robots. They are not intelligent, that is, they cannot think by themselves, although they act as though they can. This 74 model is programmed to find its way through a maze. It locates and remembers obstacles and so navigates without bumping into them. When its batteries begin to run down, it plugs itself into a power point for a recharge. That was in 1974. Here is the 77 model. The article claims that this could be the housekeeper of the future. It is programmed by tape and performs various household duties. It serves dinner, vacuums rugs and babysits. It has a 250-word vocabulary. It can even insult your enemies. Here is the 78 model. You may have seen these articles about it. Because it can be programmed, it could be made to do other things, not limited to the domestic field. At Disneyland, there is a statue of Abraham Lincoln. This statue does some remarkable things considering it was built over 20 years ago. The eyes and hands move, the face muscles flex, and he appears to speak. It's done by the clever use of mechanical levers, hydraulic pumps and small electric motors to make the parts move. It's so realistic, you'd think it was alive. Here is C-3PO from Star Wars. Of course, it was a man in a robot suit. But with today's super technology, can you imagine a robot full of tiny computers controlled by a larger computer, perhaps miles away? Seeing what's available to the public and technicians, what do you imagine is going on behind the scenes? Some people in the near future may not be quite what you think. Here is Photography magazine of December 76 with an article about the making of a movie called Future World. On the far left, you see an all-white photo of Peter Fonda. He was painted with a special white paint and this photograph was taken. All the others are computer-generated images of various angles that never existed. Here are more of the computerized images that were used in that movie. Here is a digitizing desk. Those magnetic rings on the photo are sending coded information into the computer's memory banks. This is the console of that computer. At the top right is the image being generated. This computer is an IBM machine at NASA. Here is a close-up of one of the images we saw earlier. Once you have the basic information in the computer, you can alter it any way you want, and with a series of images, you can give him any facial expression and make him do anything by computer. Another close-up of the computer-generated face. How easy it would be to store information on people. Suppose a world leader died or disappeared and it was to be kept from the public. A computer programmed to simulate his features, movements, mannerisms, even his voice patterns could show him making a speech to the world, but you would be watching a computer-generated image of a man who no longer existed. This is a photograph of Pine Gap just south of Alice Springs. Many things about Pine Gap are mysteries and will probably remain so for a long time. The deepest hole ever dug in Australia is recorded as being 28,000 feet. That's over 5 miles at Pine Gap. You can see on the far left what looks like a flagpole, but flagpoles aren't usually 200 feet tall, even on an American base. If this was the tip of a 5-mile antenna going down into that hole, it would be ideal for transmitting or receiving energy at high voltage and at low frequency. Nikola Tesla, scientific genius, yet few people have heard of him. His work at the turn of the century gave us our modern electricity supply system, electric motors, and much of our modern technology. He demonstrated that enormous power could be drawn from the electrical potential between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. After his death in 1943, the US government seized all his private papers and equipment. If we are correct, Pine Gap is using Nikola Tesla's secrets. It seems likely that Pine Gap is a power source for several thousand miles to ships, submarines and aircraft that have circuits tuned to Pine Gap's broadcast. Did you know that a rather simple circuit can be used to recharge 12-volt batteries by drawing on the power from a local radio station? If you raise the voltage 100,000 times or millions of times and you broadcast power at low frequencies, you can receive it from much greater distances and charge up much bigger batteries, perhaps even plasma batteries. Pine Gap is about 12 miles south of Alice Springs. The security is so tight that Gough Whitlam was denied entry even when he was Prime Minister. It is known that the security systems use the very latest in voice response computers. Every person has his own unique voice print, rather like a fingerprint. In only a few seconds, a voice response computer can identify you by your voice. Imagine the possibilities. How many telephone conversations are being recorded and stored in computers right now? But the centre at Pine Gap can't hold a candle to the massive computer complex down near Woomera in South Australia, which is linked to the great computer type around the world. There are now at least 160 giant computers linked constantly by satellite. The uses of these will perhaps be a bit more obvious later on. Nation Review 74.
Pine Gap does science fiction research. The Pine Gap Research Facility near Alice Springs has managed to keep secret until now one of the most unbelievable research projects in the world. The United States has been carrying out continuous research into electromagnetic propulsion at Pine Gap since it was established in 1966. Research into electromagnetic propulsion began in the United States soon after World War II. After some successful results, it became necessary to move the experimentation from populated areas to more remote spots.
Pine Gap expands, September 69, 4 domes. Pine Gap in 1975, 5 domes. 1978, 6 domes. The antenna faces a different direction. The operations there are top secret, but we do know that they are broadcasting enormous amounts of power at high voltage and low frequency. Why is this power being broadcast, and who is receiving it? We'll see that Pine Gap may be part of a worldwide network with a rather special purpose. The subject of UFOs always raises questions, doubts, arguments and tempers. UFOs seem to be real, and obviously people have seen something. This is from the movie in the mid-50s called The Forbidden Planet. The two-tube energy exchange system under the craft indicates that electric flying machines were well tried and tested, possibly as early as World War II. In the top drawing, an aircraft wing uses pressure differences to create lift. Below, a saucer is a circular version of the same wing shape. So how do we cause air to flow from the top to the outside edges to produce lift? In 1821, Faraday showed how a magnet moving in a coil produces electricity. The Earth has a magnetic field. If we could build something to work on the same principle, but spinning millions of times faster, we could create very high voltages. If electric charges were made to flow from the top of the saucer and around to the underside of the craft, the air would be compressed underneath. And this would generate a pressure increase below, causing the craft to lift with little or no turbulence. Theoretically, the craft should work, but it would be difficult to control. If we vary the flow to 3 different points under the craft, we can control direction. The charge moving over the surface would generate a glow. Reports of UFOs have mentioned glowing. Since World War II at least, the United States and other countries have known the secrets of electric flying machines. At the bottom you see an earlier model. Those portholes are really exhaust outlets for a combustion engine that generated the 15 million volts needed to drive the craft. At that time they had to generate a very hot conductive gas and flow it through a magnetic field. Today there are much better ways. The secret is in the plasmoid in the centre, shown red. It's a type of plasma battery. It's a conductive gas spinning at incredibly high speed in a vacuum. It produces an electric charge which is directed up the tube to the field focus wall, and from there it flows all over the non-conductive outside surface. The extendable landing pods, shown yellow, are to conduct various amounts of charge. This gives stability and allows turning. There is a book explaining how these sources work. The question is, who's making them and why? These craft need a power source of high voltage and low frequency. There are numerous sightings of UFOs in Central Australia. Do you think there might be some connection with Pine Gap? Periodically we get convincing reports from the outback about people seeing UFOs. This one is from Sunday Sun, January 78.
Post magazine, February 78. The UFO show.
Also in the outback of Australia.
Sunday Sun, November 78. UFOs are terrorising the outback.
Do you remember in January 79 the UFO sighting in New Zealand? There was a sighting a couple of hours later in Southport, then in Toowoomba, then in Dalby. I wonder where they were heading. UFO sightings are continually being reported, a surprising number from Central Australia. This book, The Mendelov Conspiracy, will not be easy to obtain. It was written in 1972 and shortly afterwards removed from the market. The author, Martin Caidin, has several other bestsellers, so why was this one stopped? It is supposedly fiction about a plot by scientists who reason that the world has come so close to nuclear destruction that they, the scientists, must take action to fool the people of the world into a harmony to get rid of the weapons of war and set up a one-world government. The names in the book are thinly disguised real scientists. This is written on the back of the book.
Could it be that the government was really endorsing a grotesque, misguided experiment intended to shock the world into nuclear submission?
In the story, they used a false invasion from space to fool the people of the world into a one-world government. Star Trek. Star Trek was written and produced primarily by Gene Roddenberry, who was advised by the RAND Corporation, RAND, R-A-N-D, for research and development for the US Air Force. Why would RAND be so interested in the details and production of this particular show? The RAND company told Roddenberry,
"This is what you will use in the show, a spacecraft that can travel faster than light."
the Enterprise may be a bit ambitious for us to build just yet. It would need to be 2.5 miles long, but we do have the understanding of technology to travel at speeds faster than light. Just before his death, Albert Einstein admitted there was an error in some of his work. The error was discovered in the early 50s, and since then tremendous advances have been made in the field of super technology and super physics. For example, those so-called laser guns or photon cannons are quite real. Such cannons have already been tested from US and Australian warships. They completely annihilate the target at the speed of light. Some years ago, they were able to destroy an aeroplane 5 miles up in seconds, leaving no debris. When President Carter announced in late 1977 that the death ray was a big joke, he was either poorly informed or else he was deliberately covering up. Carter was trained by the US Navy. He is a qualified nuclear engineer and would be well aware of projects underway for years on plasma ray systems. Anyone can get information on these things from the Smithsonian Science Information Exchange, also at some universities. Here is a page about explosion fields and plasma flows. Information is available to those who want to research these things. In August 78, The Australian reported that the death ray was real and that $450 million had been spent on research. They can kill a high subsonic target in flight by a laser gun. This supposedly latest news was years out of date. This is from a Star Trek magazine. The author says,
The awesome, powerful Starship Enterprise roamed the galaxies, a benevolent force amid the sometimes chaotic and sometimes evil worlds it found. Star Trek today is no longer just a television series. It has become a philosophy for many who look on it as portraying a society that has overcome most of the problems that plague us today. A society which they hope will come to pass in the not-too-distant future.
what would happen if someone else's starship arrived with this message?
People of Earth, we come in peace. We mean you no harm. We can solve your problems for you. Join the Federation. We offer you the blessings of our advanced technology so everyone can live in peace, love and harmony.
Would you believe that they were from outer space and their offer was genuine? The human mind is like a computer. No matter how intelligent you may be, the reliability of your mind can only be as great as the information fed into it. If it is possible to program the input of your mind, it is entirely possible to program what you will think. And yes, it's even possible to program you to laugh at the idea that you're being programmed. Public opinion is swayed to and fro by newspapers, radio and TV. We are often given emotional issues and opinions rather than facts, so we only get part of the story. A wise man once said,
Your judgment is no better than your information.
if someone wants to program public opinion, all he needs to do is control the media. If he wanted to control the world, he'd have to get people to want a one-world government because they believed it was the only solution. But a solution to what? Give people a choice between world chaos and world government. But where would he start? First of all, convince everyone that the whole world is in big trouble. We have riots, race problems around the world, black versus white, Arabs and Jews, police and radicals. Have you noticed they always get a good news coverage and TV cameras just happen to be ready for protest marches and riots? Have you listened to the chanting? Regardless of what the protest is about, most marches sound something like this. What do we want?
We want this.
What do we want?
We want that.
What do we want?
We want this.
Have you noticed the same organisers in the background? Most people live in polluted cities where they are led to believe that the whole world is overcrowded. But it's not overcrowded in the country, is it? We are threatened by the so-called atomic arms race. We are living on the brink of World War III. The whole world could be destroyed, they tell us. Now, what would unite all nations? If the Americans offered peace, the Chinese wouldn't accept it. If the Chinese offered peace, the Russians wouldn't accept it. What if some advanced race from outer space made the offer? Wouldn't most people accept it out of fear? Will you be really surprised when they do arrive? Of course not. You've been programmed for years to expect them. In the mid-50s, the Forbidden Planet, with its highly advanced technology as an incentive to mankind. Does this spaceship look familiar? You saw it in that movie. In the late 60s, we had 2001. Do you remember that incredible IBM computer named HAL? Here is HAL. HAL stands for Heuristically Programmed Algorithmic Computer. But move each of these three letters, HAL, forward one place in the alphabet, and HAL becomes IBM. HAL, or is it IBM, ran this entire spaceship and the men on board. But that movie took us a step further. If man reached the next stage of his so-called evolution, he would be born into the new age and become a brother of the universe. And then we had Star Wars, and we were introduced to the Force, the cosmic consciousness. This is continued in The Empire Strikes Back and follow-up movies. It is witchcraft and occult teaching from old Illuminati books. Newsweek, December 77. Was this merely to introduce close encounters, or are we to believe that the UFOs are really coming? Close encounters of the third kind, contact with extraterrestrials. Are we to believe that the super advanced beings will be the solution to all of man's problems? Do you really believe God needs a flying saucer to visit us? The Australian, January 79, asked the question,
Close encounters. Are we alone? Probably not.
Says John Pinckney, who writes regular articles on the occult. He believes that we will soon be visited by advanced civilizations.
Perhaps they are preparing to help us. Our elder brothers are coming.
Says the Courier Mail, January 79. So, the news media is telling us, the movies are telling us, there are also other ways to get us to look for our so-called brothers from space.
Our audiences are fingertip controlled.
Controlling people through music is a specialised science. People can be indoctrinated not only by words but also by music. The careful use of flashing lights, pulses, beats, tempos, electronic sound effects, ultra high and low frequencies can be used to have a subliminal programming effect on a person without him being aware. MASH. The theme music is called Suicide is Painless. This double LP was advertised in the Australian November 79.
Better than drugs. Music from the drug culture, perpetrated for the proliferation of evil. The song that made people kill themselves.
Gloomy Sunday has been blamed for so many suicides that most radio stations refuse to play it.
Holding on to
occupants of interplanetary most extraordinary craft. Have you listened closely to the words of this song? They tell us to call on the super-intelligent beings from space to come and help mankind. Our Earth may never survive. What do they say here?
We are your friends.
On the record label, it says that this song is
A recognised anthem of World Contact Day.
I wonder what that means. An excellent tape is available on programming people by the use of different kinds of music. On November 26, 77, thousands of Britons were contentedly watching their Saturday night television shows when bleeps interrupted the normal program. The voice of Astron had a message for the planet Earth.
This is the voice of Astron. I am an authorised representative of the intergalactic mission, and I have a message for the planet Earth. We are beginning to enter the period of Aquarius, and there are many corrections which have to be made by Earth people. All your weapons of evil must be destroyed. You only have a short time to live together in peace.
Remember Dr. Pache said he was going to use shock therapy to get us all to accept the one world control? It's quite easy to set up a powerful transmitter to overpower radio and TV stations. Was that a practice run? The plan at this stage appears to be a worldwide economic collapse to destroy people's faith in silver, gold and money. It may be done some way like this. The Australian, January 78, it was announced suddenly in India on the 11 o'clock late night news that large banknotes were declared worthless. The next day people realised the true value of banknotes. They were bits of worthless paper. Was this merely a trap for Mrs. Gandhi and her friends who supposedly stockpile large notes, or was it a trial run for the worldwide collapse? In July 78, a newspaper reporter was asked how the communists established control over the economy in Vietnam. He said,
The North Vietnamese froze all bank accounts, then suddenly changed the currency on the basis of 1 new piastre to 500 old piastre.
that means every $5 was now worth 1 cent.
However, people were able to receive only 200 new piastre, and the rest was confiscated. The effect was to destroy the savings of the entire population and make them dependent on the regime.
That report was from News Weekly, a small independent newspaper. The reporter gives a good description of life inside Vietnam today. In case you were wondering what happened to mortgages and debts, they were cancelled. That's right, no more debts to pay off. But people no longer own their homes and property either. Everything is under central government control. The international bankers control the money system of all nations, both Western and communist. Did you know that Rockefeller Chase Manhattan Bank has a branch in Peking? Also, number 1 Karl Marx Place in Moscow? They have already planned a new money system for Australia. In part 4, you'll find out how it works. Who determines the price of gold and silver? Make sure you see part 4 of this program before you invest in silver and gold. The Middle East, the most hotly contested piece of real estate on Earth. Suppose the international bankers engineered an overnight worldwide financial collapse and a couple of low-yield nuclear bombs were dropped there. People everywhere would panic, thinking that World War III had started. Wouldn't it be convenient for Dr. Pache and his Illuminati friends if, just in time, the electric flying saucers suddenly appeared around the world and over radio and TV we all heard this message?
People of Earth, we come in peace. Let us help you. If you allow us to reorganise your planet, we will give you the blessings of our technology. All mankind can live in peace, love and harmony. If not, we will back off and let you destroy yourselves. The choice is yours.
This would be the ultimate in shock therapy, wouldn't it? If it happens, will you believe it's from outer space or a hidden civilization from the past? If you think the idea is far-fetched, we'll show you in a few moments some of the preparations now underway. We live in the age of computers. Science promises that the golden age is just around the corner. The computers will do everything for us and life will be peace, love and harmony. This is an old photograph of the filing room in the US Social Security Department. Those reels are computer tapes and this room holds files of personal private information on every person in America. Governments around the world have been gathering information on you and me and feeding it into computers. Why do they need so much information? How good is the record-keeping system? To show how far we've come in the field of super-speed technology, here is a quote from February 76 edition of Computer Digest.
In the half second it takes for spilled coffee to fall from table to floor, today's computer can debit 2,000 checks to 300 different bank accounts and examine electrocardiograms of 1,000 patients and score 150,000 answers on 3,000 exams, concurrently evaluating the effectiveness of the question and figure the payroll for a company with 1,000 employees and still have time left before the coffee hits the floor. The laser computer possesses the capability of placing on one reel of magnetic tape less than 5,000 feet long the names, addresses, credit rating and 20 pages of personal information of every man, woman and child in the United States. That is 220 million people, each with 20-page manuscript about himself packed onto one reel of recording tape.
That was in February 76. September 78, that microchip on the girl's finger contains 48,000 transistors. A memory chip this size can store 8 times as much information as a Sydney telephone directory. This chip goes even further. It can recognise human voices. It's a voice response computer. Computers have many uses. Let's look at one rather special application.
Sunday Mail, June 77, the day you'll get rid of your money.
It seems that the credit card system will soon replace notes and coins. Does your wallet look like this? There are several credit card systems operating now. Some people think they are the answer, others won't touch them. A few believe that we should have one card for all transactions. And in Australia, one likely contender is BankCard. This is from their advertising brochure. The ideas they promote are naturally the positive ones. It reduces paperwork in shops and banks, no notes or coins to print. It reduces the crime of theft, easy to carry, no bad checks. It certainly seems highly logical. There are some people who cannot control themselves when it comes to money and spending. Are you one? Or are you living carefully within your means? You don't have any debts, do you?
Sunday Telegraph, January 78, cash is dirty money and cheques are a write-off.
Summing up the article, very soon no one will use cash. We'll all use a debit credit card. In many places you cannot pay cash for anything. The shops will not accept it. You must use a credit card. It sounds incredible, but they will not accept cash. It seems that someone is very anxious to get us all onto BankCard. This is a confidential letter that was sent to managers only of one of the banking groups. The managers are told that there are to be no more personal loans or overdrafts to professional men. That is, dentists, optometrists, opticians and so on. These people must go onto BankCard. The letter tells the managers to investigate their accounts and send the information to BankCard headquarters. They'll do the rest.
Sydney Sun Herald, February 79, BankCard, at last the banks strike it rich. BankCard has become a bonanza, not for the customer of course, but for the backers of the green and yellow credit card, the big Australian banks. BankCard was launched in October 74. There are now around 2 million cardholders in Australia.
That was in February 79. Through BankCard, Australians are now spending over $30 million a week on personal goods.
This is wonderful business for the banks that own BankCard because these purchases often lead the cardholders into debt.
In the early days, the banks were frustrated by Australians paying their bills each month, but
no longer. According to the Reserve Bank, Australians owed $655 million to BankCard last December 78. It's estimated that the banks were earning interest at the rate of around $6 million a month out of BankCard. Not bad going for a relatively new organisation with an $8 million investment.
Now do you understand how the banks create money out of nothing? How is it possible to be owed $655 million when they had only $8 million to start with? A profit of $6 million a month on an $8 million investment worked out to be 900% profit a year. No wonder they're promoting BankCard. For those who think they are getting something for nothing by using BankCard and then paying the account before the end of the month, don't forget, the storekeeper has to pay 5% or so for every time you use your card. To cover this, he is forced to raise prices. Incidentally, that $655 million debt in 1978 had risen to $1.19 billion in June 1981. Brisbane people will recognise this telecom building at Woolloongabba. Modern electronic telephone equipment requires little space and staff, so why such a large building? Every part of this building is electronically monitored. Even employees with ID cards are prohibited from certain areas. This building is also for the Central BankCard computer for Queensland. It feeds into the giant computer complex near Woomera in South Australia. BankCard has two purposes. One is to condition you to the cashless society. The second is to gather information on you. All Australian bank cards begin with the number 4. This is not just for Queensland, it's for every Australian state. You may remember, Australia is part of Region 4 in the Club of Rome's 10 regions.
Sunday Sun, May 78. Checkouts go computer.
Apparently this system helps shopkeepers balance their stocks.
And in the same paper, this new cash register has magic eyes.
You may have seen a special marking appearing on many items. It tells the computer all about the item you buy. This special mark is already on a number of magazines, food lines and other items. Let's take a closer look. The magic eye of the cash register, or should we say checkout register, can recognise the thickness and spacing of those lines, and it knows all about the item you buy. Now what do you think the next step will be? When they suddenly declare that cash is worthless, like they did in India and Vietnam, you'll be forced to get your bank card. So when you buy something, the computer will know all about you and what you buy. Nothing will be private. What will happen when you're short of credit? You try to buy something, you put your card under the scanner, and within a few seconds, the checkout computer, which is linked to the central computer, will flash a red light.
Sorry, no credit.
What will you do? What will you do? It wouldn't help to start abusing the storekeeper. It's not his fault. The only option left would be to steal someone else's card. This is already happening. People are losing their cards and they are being stolen. Here is a warning bulletin from Bank Card headquarters. This is part of a list of bank cards throughout Australia which have been lost, stolen or have bad credit ratings. Notice the red numbers at the top of each column? They all begin with 4. But how are they going to stop people from using stolen cards? Remember the old tactic of pressure from above and pressure from below?
Somebody stole my card and spent all my money before I found out. I can't get credit anywhere. The family's starving.
Why doesn't the government do something? How will you react when they introduce the new law, which says everyone has to be numbered? The laser machinery is already waiting to tattoo a number onto your right hand or onto your forehead. Most people are right-handed, and the number on the forehead is for people who wear gloves in cold countries where the hands are normally covered. Obviously, you can't steal hands or heads, so under the new system, there could be no forgery. So the problem of stolen bank cards will be solved. But now, every transaction that you make will be recorded in the computer system. This is the computer link-up system from the Club of Rome's book, Mankind at the Turning Point. They have worked out your diet, calorie allowance, work hours, food distribution, entertainment, size of families, and on and on. You will be paid in what they call energy units, credited to your account in the computer. This will be the new money system. Gold, silver, cash, cheques will be obsolete. In scientific journals lately, IBM have been boasting to the world that the giant computer complex near Woomera is the ultimate in computer technology. It is by far the most advanced in the worldwide network of at least 160 computers linked by satellite. Imagine just how much information could be stored in a network like that. But what if you don't want to be in this system? Will you accept a number and be told where to live, what work to do, what you may eat, your entertainment, how many children you may have? In the book of Revelation, there is an interesting section in chapter 13. It refers to a dictator who will one day take control of the world.
He compels all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked with an inscription stamped on their right hands or on their forehead, so that no one will have power to buy or sell unless he bears the stamp. That is the name of the beast or the number of his name. Let anyone who has intelligence calculate the number of the beast, for it is a human number, the number of a certain man. His number is 666.
The worldwide computer network now recognises the code numbers of things you buy. It would be easy for it to also recognise your code number. Now what about the 666? Have you studied the bank card symbol? Can you see a yellow 6 on an orange 6 on a red 6? It certainly looks like 3 6s, doesn't it?
Finance and government institutions in the US and abroad are utilising variations of this horizontal logo, 666.
Does this also look like 3 6s? This symbol is used by the European Common Market. In the past, various religious groups used convincing arguments to identify the beast of Revelation. Julius Caesar was supposed to be the beast, so was Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler. Numerology has even been used to make the Latin words on the Pope's hat add up to 666. But none of these will be able to totally control what every human being buys and sells. What we are being offered is no less than a world dictatorship in which money, as we know it, will be obsolete. The only money will be energy units in a computer account. To earn energy units, you must work where the computer tells you. To have an account in the computer, you must be numbered. Is it a coincidence that 1900 years ago, the Apostle John wrote the Bible prophecy that no one will be able to get a job or buy anything without a certain mark tattooed on their right hand or forehead? In 1978, the Chinese completed construction of a superhighway right through to Israel. A huge dam has also been constructed in northeast Syria on the Euphrates River. 2 more dams are on the Euphrates, one in Turkey and one in Iraq. They could be used to dry up the river for the kings of the east to cross it for their invasion as mentioned in prophecy, Revelation 16:12. According to Revelation, the world dictator will bring in such fantastic plans for economic prosperity that the whole world will acclaim him. He will permit the Jews to rebuild the temple and they will think he's marvellous, but he will turn against them shortly afterwards. The world dictator will set himself up and rule the world from the temple. He will demand that he be worshipped as God. Anyone who refuses to worship him will be executed by the guillotine. Revelation 13:15. In recent years, there has been a tremendous growth in unusual religions and philosophies. Many are from what is known as the Great White Brotherhood. It can be traced back to ancient satanic religions. One of their books on the left is Links with Space. It's telling us that the so-called New Age is about to begin. They believe that our elder brothers will soon come and teach us the secrets of the universe. Fred Robertson, founder of a community in Western Australia known as the Universal Brotherhood, says,
There's a new age of peace and prosperity ahead for the world. The message comes from our space brothers who say it's about to dawn. That's the good news, but before, there will be cataclysmic changes. We are preparing here for the millennium, a new age of peace and prosperity for the world. Our space brothers have revealed that first there will be cataclysmic changes to the planet.
Mary, his wife, adds,
Some people may be lifted up by beams of light into flying saucers to be kept safe till after the cataclysm.
Fred continues,
Knowledge was passed on to me by two teachers who trained me in Queensland many years ago. Both were from other more advanced planets, but had been incarnated on Earth in human form. Among other things, they told me the timetable for Earth's transition into the new age.
none of this is new. It's been in occult and astrology books for centuries. This book, Satan is Alive and Well on Planet Earth, will help you understand the origins of false religions, reincarnation, astrology, and what they call the New Age. You've seen the connection between history, politics, money, religion, and technology. Well, Jesus said,
As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of my second coming.
what did he mean by that? As well as the evil that existed then before the flood, and certainly exists today, there are other signs for us to look for.
The light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold as the light of 7 days concentrated into one.
Isaiah 30:26,
There was a great earthquake, the moon became like blood.
Revelation 6:12,
A third of the sun was smitten and a third of the moon.
Revelation 8:12. So let's see if these prophecies are possible.
The moon became like blood.
If the sun's light to earth was reduced by 1/3, the light from the moon would also be reduced by 1/3. This is how things may look if the sun is disturbed sufficiently. Great storms are predicted. Again, science and the Bible are in agreement.
And great hailstones, between 50 and 60 pounds, fell from the sky.
Revelation 16:21. 50-pound hailstones? What we know as hailstones are really particles of ice. What if it should really hail stones? Where could the stones come from? The Earth regularly passes through streams of cometary debris producing a spate of so-called falling stars. Most falling stars are no larger than a grain of sand. They ignite and burn up in the air. If they hit us, they may not completely burn up, but could strike the Earth and really hail stones. Not far from us, in solar terms, there is a belt of asteroids between Jupiter and Mars. These asteroids are rocks ranging from a few pounds in weight to several miles in diameter. If these were disturbed during the alignments and attracted towards the sun, the Earth could be showered with rocks and boulders. This is a comet photographed in Western Australia a few years ago. But can you imagine a large meteor, perhaps a mile in diameter, crashing onto the moon? We are told that the craters on the moon happen like this. If something like this happened here, it would shake the whole world. But of course that couldn't happen. The atmosphere would protect us, wouldn't it? Or would it? This great hole is the Arizona crater, almost a mile in diameter. It's a big hole. Whatever caused this must have shaken the whole world. But the certainties that we can rely on today are before us. The Bible is the inspired word of God, and its prophecies of those coming events are falling across our path with greater frequency. Science is foretelling the same events. This is not intended to be a Bible study. The purpose is to provide basic information on historical events and scientific knowledge, much of which has been withheld or deliberately distorted. Bible prophecy has always been 100% accurate. It has much to say about coming events. Today we see many denominations and religious groups using the same Bible translations, and yet they have conflicting interpretations. Obviously, they can't all be right. Because of the military conquest by Alexander the Great around 300 BC, a language developed so scientifically accurate that any spoken or written message could have only one possible interpretation. This language, Koine Greek, not classical Greek, but Koine Greek, K-O-I-N-E, became the original language of the New Testament. There is great benefit in learning Bible truths under a minister who continues to study and teach directly from the original. Bible prophecy describes the Great Tribulation. It begins with the emergence of a popular leader who quickly brings about a short time of world peace, but it will be followed by unparalleled natural disasters. In Matthew 24:21, Christ said,
There will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, and never will be again.
a global war will start, great weapons. A quarter of the world's population will die from war and hunger. There will be earthquakes, mountains and islands will be dislodged, the sun will be darker. Panic and terror will be everywhere. A third of all shipping will be destroyed. Many people will die from poisoned waters. Another third of the world will die from war and plagues. More earthquakes and great hailstones. All life in the sea will die. The sun turns fierce and scorches humanity. The greatest earthquake in history. Giant hailstones. They may occur very soon, or they could be years away. The world leader will move into the temple in Jerusalem. He will be the world dictator, commonly known as the Beast or Antichrist of Revelation. He declares that everyone must be numbered on the right hand or forehead. The 200 million soldiers from the east head towards Israel for the battle of all time involving all nations, the Battle of Armageddon. This is when Christ returns in glory just in time to prevent complete annihilation of the world. He will then wipe out all those people who have refused to accept him as the Messiah. Bible prophecy was not given to create panic and fear. The Bible is God's handbook, given to let you know what will happen so that you can be ready. Jesus told us in Matthew 24 that no one can know the day nor the hour of his return.
For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a loud cry of summons, with the shout of an archangel, and with the blast of the trumpet of God. And those who have departed this life in Christ will rise first. Then we, the still living who remain on the earth, shall simultaneously be caught up along with the resurrected dead in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so always we shall be with the Lord. Therefore comfort and encourage one another with these words.
In recent years, many denominations are using welfare programs and emotionalism to draw crowds and raise money. Many church leaders do not believe even basic Bible truths. It looks as though the prophesied one world church is on the way. You may be living a good life or otherwise. You may have religion or a philosophy. At any moment, your death could occur. Man was made to enjoy a close relationship with the Creator, but man chose to go his own way. This act of rebellion or passive indifference is what the Bible describes as sin.
All have sinned and come short of the glory of God.
Romans 3:23.
The wages of sin is death.
Romans 6:23. Good works, religion, morality, none of these will bridge the gap. Man cannot reach God by his own efforts.
It is by free grace, God's unmerited favour, that you are saved from judgment through your faith. And this salvation is not of your own doing, it is the gift of God, not because of works, lest any man should boast.
Ephesians 2:8-9. On the cross, Jesus Christ paid in full for all the sins of every person, past, present and future.
He is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance.
2 Peter 3:9. Repentance is a change of attitude or thinking. In Acts 16:31,
Believe in and on the Lord Jesus Christ. That is, give yourself up to him. Take yourself out of your own keeping and entrust yourself into his keeping, and you will be saved.
in John 14:6, Jesus said,
I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
many have claimed to have been sent from God. Jesus Christ is unique. He proved his claims when he rose from the dead. John 3:36.
He who believes on, relies on the Son, now possesses eternal life. But whoever is unbelieving, refuses to trust in, disregards the Son, will never experience life. But the wrath of God remains on him continually.
This makes it quite clear that people who reject Jesus Christ and depend on religion, living by the golden rule or any other rules, will suffer everlasting misery, separated from God. If you have not already received God's free gift of eternal life, you can do so right now. You will not be asked to raise your hand or come to the front or embarrass anyone. In the privacy of your own mind, you can tell God the Father in your own words that you are believing and trusting in Christ right now. Bible prophecy reveals that during the tribulation, the one world church will introduce public executions by the guillotine. The victims will be people who become believers or people who refuse to be numbered. Now, what will happen to people who are numbered?
Painful ulcers came on the people who were marked with the stamp of the beast and who did homage to his image.
Revelation 16:2. And then, for eternity,
The smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, those who pay homage to the beast and his image, and whoever receives the stamp of his name upon him.
Revelation 14:11. So there you have it. Do what you must to survive, but do not get numbered. But conspiracy is different. On the surface, it rests on two pillars, big government and money control. Exposure is their greatest fear. With the knowledge gained from this presentation and from books and tapes, learn to read between the lines of news reports.
Hong Kong Standard, September 80. Identity cards a must.
For residents and visitors. How long before they start putting numbers on people? Bank card, Visa and MasterCharge are part of the same worldwide computerised credit system. This giant computer network grows more powerful every day as information is fed into it by anyone who continues to use these cards. Throughout history, the great battle has been for the control of people's minds. We have briefly touched on many subjects, and as you learn more, you will realise that religious organisations and secret societies have used politics and finance as fronts for the great conspiracy which seeks to enslave mankind for eternity. Christ warned us in Matthew 24:23,
If anyone says to you, here is Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise, and they will show great signs and wonders, so as to deceive and lead astray, if possible, even the elect, God's chosen ones.
This warning is probably more important today than ever before. This advertisement would have us believe
The Christ is now here.
major newspapers throughout the world printed this on April 24, 1982. One thing is for certain, this is not the Lord Jesus Christ. Everything in this advertisement contradicts the Bible description of Christ's return. Whatever the purpose behind recent events, the important issue now is, if you have not yet made a decision on God's free offer of eternal life, you are urged to do so above all else. Anything could happen from here on at any moment. It is suggested you find a church where Bible truths are correctly analysed and consistently taught. A free Bible study tape is available on request. You can only benefit from God's promises if you know what the promises are. This program is not a front for any religious organisation or political party. It has been created and financed by a few people who spent countless hours in preparation. You can arrange for your friends to see it. No charge is made, but if you wish to support this work, donations or offers of help are appreciated.
Bankruptcy and foreclosure on your home. A frightening thought, isn't it? To understand how and why it happens to thousands of Australians every year, listen for just 36 minutes to make sure it never happens to you or your children. I am the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. I am the most important document in this land. Without me, all other contracts and agreements are worthless bits of paper. Even your money and the deeds to your home are worthless without my protection. Yes, the very fabric of your free Australian society is vitally dependent upon me. Perhaps you've never heard of me, or if you have, the chances are you know little about me. Why? Because there are those living among you who are deadly afraid of me. They've kept me out of your schools and universities for decades, and they fully intend to have me quietly hidden away from you. Why? Because I am the rule of law, the moral law, and not the rule of men. Listen to my story. Although I was born in July 1900, my original ancestor was carved in stone on Mount Sinai 3,500 years ago. Those 10 commandments have remained unchanged throughout the centuries, and not one word will ever be changed. Jesus brought those 10 rules together perfectly in 2 simple commandments in the New Testament. If you love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself, then you break no laws. That is the true meaning of those words. You are not under the law unless you break the law. If you do not break the rules of the road, you're not subject to them. Break them, and you are subject to them and will pay the legal penalty. Those 10 commandments are not oppressive. They are the foundation for maximum freedom and rights for individuals in any nation at any time in history. 8 centuries ago, another great ancestor of mine was born, Magna Carta, one of the most magnificent documents ever written by man. The people of England, the barons and the church leaders, had had enough of King John behaving like a dictator, so they made him sign the Magna Carta in 1215. It guarantees so many freedoms, rights and responsibilities that you take for granted today, but you have been kept from knowing about. The Magna Carta is common law. It is part of me today. It declares,
No free man shall be taken, indeed imprisoned, either dispossessed or outlawed or exiled, or in any manner destroyed, except by means of the legal judgment of his own equals, indeed the law of the land.
Common law. His own equals, plural, is a jury of 12 people. A single judge is not an equal, and can never be, because no individual is unbiased. After King John was put in his rightful place, the Habeas Corpus Act was established in 1640 and secured in 1679. It states clearly that no one can be jailed without a proper jury trial. A suspected criminal may be reasonably detained until a jury trial occurs, But a jail sentence cannot be legally ordered because on July 5th, 1641, habeas corpus also abolished the Star Chamber, where a single judge made orders. It was also known as the Star Chamber of Satan and was despised by parliaments and the church. It was outlawed for 400 years because of its anti-Christian procedures, but in 1975, it was re-established in Australia disguised as the family court. More of that shortly. The Bill of Rights was written into law in 1688 with additional protections. It is part of me today. It is common law. In 1899, I was adopted by the Australian people in a referendum, and I became your most important deed in 1900. I became well known in your homes, and you knew that my rules apply to everyone, no exceptions. I was taught in your schools and universities up to 1975. I am drawn from the very best of the tried and tested wisdom of the centuries for the rule of law for any nation, not the rule of greedy men who have no allegiance to anyone but themselves. I am written in simple English in numbered sections dealing with various areas of your life and your culture. Read me. I am straightforward and easy to understand. You can download me from this CD into your own computer and print copies for your computerless friends to read and get to know. Since 1900, there have been amazing changes in technology, and whether you drive a horse and buggy or the latest supercar, human nature does not change. Those wise men who hammered out my words over the centuries knew this, and they allowed for it. Yes, I can be changed, but only by a majority of you, my people, in a majority of states, in a referendum. And this includes the so-called laws of local councils. They call them ordinances. Yet they continue to illegally create new laws and bylaws without your knowledge or consent. That includes any laws that tamper with your food, your water supply, or even daylight saving. In September 1988, they tried to sneak a new law through which would give local councils the power to make new laws as they pleased. This was rejected by you, my people, in that referendum. Any council laws that conflict with common law are illegal. No one, not even a policeman, may legally enter your property without your consent or a proper judiciary order. If anyone says they're authorised by a town council, that is a lie. No council, no government department, nor any private organisation can authorise one person to make a rule over another. Those counterfeit policemen and women have no legal authority over you, no matter who they say they work for. So if they do enter your property, threaten you in any way, or try to take anything which is legally yours, have a video camera ready and record it. They hate it. Remind them that an order by a single magistrate is not a judiciary order. It is illegal because it is a violation of common law in the Criminal Code Act 1995, Section 268(10). Any council laws that conflict with common law are illegal. Proper rules are not oppressive. They're there to protect freedoms. Before we play golf, we all agree to abide by the rules. The ball should be played where it lays, is to be obeyed by everyone. But that rule could be changed, providing we all agree before we play. And so it is with me. There have been minor changes that have been approved by you, the majority of people in a majority of states. But they were minor issues that gave governments no increase in power. Since 1900, they attempted to get more power over you 46 times. But through national referendum, you rejected 40 of them. Did you know that in 1932, the Tasmanian government tried to abolish itself and hand over control to Canberra? The wise Governor-General said, "You can't do that. You must ask the people first." You, my people, said no, and a new government was elected. Did you know that in 1975, your Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, attempted to defraud Section 83 regarding the nation's money supply? The wise Governor-General said, "You can't do that. You must ask the people first." You, my people, said no. The Prime Minister was sacked, and you, my people, endorsed the Governor-General's action. You elected a new government with a landslide majority. The wisdom and dignity is within the office of the Governor-General, who acts on behalf of your non-biased umpire, the Sovereign of the Commonwealth, who cannot be bribed. Now you know why wannabe Republicans seek to abolish our Queen. And don't be deceived by judges and solicitors who will try to tell you that I am not valid today. That is a deliberate lie, and the High Court says so. In 1996, the High Court of Australia, the highest court in the land, Section 71, in what is called the Cable Principle, declared that the Commonwealth remains one and indivisible, just as I do, with only one judicial power, not different rules in each state. Did you know that on September 5th, 2006, in that monumental case of Forge versus Australian Securities and Investments, all 7 High Court judges stated unanimously that your Constitution reigns supreme, that's me, and that all other laws and rules are subject to me. So if any laws conflict with me, they are invalid and illegal. Section 109.
When a law of a state is inconsistent with the law of the Commonwealth, the latter shall prevail, and the former shall, to the extent of the inconsistency, be invalid.
So you see, my people, that I was hammered out over centuries by wise men who foresaw that evil individuals, organisations, local councils, even governments would try to get around me, to fulfil their power lusts and to line their own pockets. So those wise men built safeguards into me, the most important being your absolute right to trial by a proper jury, not by a single judge. A jury is your right in any court, including the evil family court. No judge, no magistrate, nor any individual has any right to dissolve a marriage or make any orders without the free consent of both spouses, face to face. Sections 79 and 80 are very clear. They state in essence that
In any court, the trial on indictment of any offence against any law of the Commonwealth shall be by jury.
today your rights to a jury in civil matters are ignored. But if a criminal offence is identified, you have the right to file a private charge via the Melbourne Magistrates Court. And after the Crown authorities have declined to present, then the legal right to apply for a grand jury in the Supreme Court of Victoria now can apply. You have little chance of a jury for civil matters, so it's better to settle out of court and save the so-called legal fees. Marriage is a Commonwealth issue, Section 51, and the Bible laws, especially in Mark chapter 10, all of it, are the guidelines. In fact, if any section of me is to be interpreted, then the Bible laws prevail, as stated in my preamble. To ensure safety, we all drive on the left-hand side of the road. Likewise, in our society, we all abide by Christian principles. When you're asked to swear on the Bible, not on any other document, it means that you and the judge and everyone in the courtroom accepts that the Bible laws are supreme, even above me, because my rules are derived from the laws in the Bible. For example, there were 12 disciples, and 12 has been the number of jury persons selected by Christian societies to be, in effect, judges plural with a small j. That is the word in my Section 79, which has court in a lowercase c and judges plural with a lowercase j. This is most important. Small c court is simply a hearing, and no judgments nor orders can be made there without your consent. Small j judges, plural, is a jury. A judge is not a justice without a jury decision. If you face a judge who went to law school later than 1975, you may need to inform him that there have been no referendums to tamper with Sections 79 or 80 or 109. If he disregards your legal right to trial by jury or attempts to dismiss your case, you must challenge the jurisdiction of that court and demand a proper jury of 12. Any order by a single judge, magistrate, registrar or anyone without your consent is invalid and also carries severe penalties against them, as listed in the Crimes Act, Section 43, for obstructing the course of justice. Judges and solicitors are deadly afraid of juries and will stop at nothing to keep them out of the courts, even threats of ridiculous fees. And if that doesn't frighten you, they've used force and harassment, off the record of course. What used to be the police service has become the armed police force. However, you are bound to obey orders by a proper policeman, and if his actions are proven to be incorrect in a legal court, then the rule of law will prevail. There are many good police officers who have taken the oath of allegiance. It's at the end of the Constitution on this CD, and they do act morally and responsibly, but they fear the sack and their super if they don't conform and obey orders, legal or otherwise. Nevertheless, one of the results of the Nuremberg trials is now adopted worldwide. It states that even if you're obeying orders to commit a crime, you are personally guilty of that crime. The judiciary will try to confuse you in legalese language. Some will rant and rave at you, some may ignore you and even attempt to order you to leave the court, but take no notice. Stand up to them and know your constitutional rights. Remind them that the court does not belong to a single judge. It is your court, the People's Court, and has been since 1215. When you go to court, do not go alone. Take a group of friends to witness the proceedings. It is a public court. They have every right to be there. Sections 79, 80 and 109 are most important. Learn them off by heart. 2,000 years ago, the wisest teacher in history challenged the evil judges and lawyers face to face in Luke chapter 11, verses 46 and 52 in your New Testament. Look it up. But their descendants are with us today in every nation. They have not changed their nature nor their plans, only their appearance. Listen to me, my people. I am the rule of law. But those who Jesus rebuked on several occasions seek the rule of men. That means ultimately Republican dictatorship. Now you say that USA is a republic. Yes, it is. But what has prevented it becoming a dictatorship is they have the Second Amendment in their Constitution, the inalienable right to bear arms. No dictator can successfully take over a nation while the people are armed. Did you know that in Switzerland and some American counties, you can be fined if you do not have a gun and ammunition in good working order in your home? Switzerland has little crime and no home invasions. In Australia, there are people promoting the idea of Australia to become a republic, but few, if any, have a clue what kind of republic they want. But they do have one thing in common. Their number one objective is to eliminate me, your constitution. Why? Because that is exactly what has been done by every dictator in history. Step 1, disarm the population. Step 2, plunge the nation into impossible financial debt. Step 3, a republic. Step 4, a dictatorship, worse than any that has ever occurred in history. In 1990, Kim Beazley was asked a question in Parliament from Senator Button. Beazley replied, "The United Nations has given the federal government a mandate of ownership for housing, farms, property and business to government control, once the Republic has been proclaimed." So there you have it, the real purpose behind the push for a republic, which will become the worst dictatorship in history. Why? Because of today's money power. Over history, money has been in many forms. Gold and silver, cattle, coconuts, and even rum in the early days here. Money is a far superior system to barter, and there's nothing wrong with lending to invest in a productive profit-sharing venture. But to charge interest on created money is the root cause of all economic problems. How ludicrous it would be if a railway organisation employed a printer to print their tickets, and the printer says,
"Because I created these tickets, I own them, and I will lend them to you at face value plus interest."
You say, how ridiculous. But that is exactly the way it is today with the money system. Have you ever heard of a train not running because they didn't print enough tickets? Of course not. But that's just as stupid as saying you can't build roads or schools or whatever we need because we lack the money. We have the materials, the man and machine power, and the skills to make it happen. So how can you say there's not enough money when in reality money is nothing more than a sophisticated ticket system? Today, the money or ticket system is 95% computer blips and only 5% notes and coins. It is created and controlled exclusively by the banks. It is the system which causes your problems, the mathematics. If the interest rate is 5% on a $100 loan of new money, then 100 plus nothing does not equal 105, which is the amount the banks demand you pay back. The extra 5 is not created, so the nation as a whole can never get out of debt to the banks. It must keep borrowing more to continue. Mayor Amschel Rothschild was from a family of goldsmith moneylenders and said,
"Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws."
So how did the Rothschilds and others become so wealthy? Around 1690, the English King William needed money for a war with France, so he borrowed £1.2 million, a staggering amount, from the goldsmith moneylenders. Their reward? He granted them a charter for the Bank of England in 1694, which made it legal for them to charge him 8% interest. This was the beginning of the modern privately owned banking system. It has taken them only a few hundred years to become the only source of money, and your slave masters. Did you know that the Reserve Bank is not a government operation? It became independent in 1960. It creates money out of nothing. But that is not the problem, as you'll see. The problem is the Reserve Bank is just like the printer for the railway tickets. It pretends it owns that new money and lends it to your government with interest on top and takes a mortgage over your taxes. Now you know where a large chunk of your taxes go. Ask yourself, or anyone who should know, politician, financial advisor, bank manager, hairdresser or cab driver, they know everything. Ask them, if every nation is in debt, who is the creditor? You'll be dismayed at the answers. Did you know that under my section 51, 4, 12 and 13, your Prime Minister and your Parliament have the duty and the legal power to solve the so-called money crisis in only a few weeks with no interest and no debt? Governments, and governments alone, not the banks, have the legitimate power to issue the nation's money or credit to represent the real wealth of the nation. The Nullarbor Railway was built under the rules of Section 51. No interest, no debt. You may ask, if it's as simple as that, why isn't it being done now by either side of politics? Why? Because many rich people and the judiciary benefit from the existing system. They don't want it changed. Did you know that cost orders in today's courts are the greatest fraud ever perpetrated upon you, my unsuspecting people? It's a huge extortion racket. In 1640, Habeas Corpus Act, which is also contained within me, ordained that
unless and until a jury trial is held and an event of a judicial nature occurs, no costs are payable by either side in proceedings, regardless of any direction from any parliament.
In other words, only a jury can award costs, and any ruling made by a single judge without your consent or a jury is illegal and invalid. Period. On August 20th, 2001, the penalty was fixed at 25 years jail for both the solicitor and the judge who commit the crime of costs orders. It comes under slavery in the Criminal Code Act, Section 268(10). Did you also know, my people, that variable interest loans are illegal? For a loan contract or any agreement under common law, there are 8 essential elements. There must be an offer, acceptance, sufficient consideration, capacity to contract, intention to enter legal relations, legality of purpose, genuine consent, and certainty of terms. Variable in the Oxford English Dictionary means uncertain. The fraud committed by the banks is contract fraud under common law, the uncertain terms of variable interest. Did you know, my people, that banks never lend depositors money? All bank loans are new money created out of nothing. It used to be at the stroke of a pen, but today it is nothing more than electronic blips in their computer system. Traitorous politicians have given the banks the power to create the nation's money, which they lend to you, and they demand interest on it. That interest can never be repaid because it does not exist. The only way you can pay that interest is to get money off someone else who also got it from someone else. But it can ultimately be traced back to a bank loan, which is the only source of money today. Judges and lawyers deny your right to trial by jury, and that is how they prevent the evidence of fraud. They protect the banks who dispossess tens of thousands of families of their homes and property every year, and they are directly responsible for many suicides. It is modern-day slavery. Slavery has long been a sad part of man's history. Yet in 1807, it was abolished through the dedicated efforts of one man, William Wilberforce. He had no internet, no CDs, no phones, none of the powerful means of communication you have today. He won the victory in the courts and in the Parliament using the very same laws and rights you still have, and he won the battle against formidable and powerful enemies. How did he do it? As a genuine Christian, he had little interest in sanctimonious gatherings in pews of indifference behind closed doors. Like a true evangelist, he took the message out to the people, and he knew that a jury of 12 who genuinely prayed, "So help me God," is the most powerful weapon against tyranny, fraud and corruption that you have. This is practical Christianity in action. Slavery has been around a long time. It was abolished by the power of God, not by a flash of lightning miracle, but through informed jurors. But did you know that juries also have the power to overrule and abolish bad laws? Yes, and that includes most of the rules found in an insidious document used by lawyers and judges today. It's called the Uniform Civil Procedures Rules. It is an illegal act passed by traitorous politicians without a referendum and ignored by apathetic churchmen. Most of it would be thrown out immediately if exposed to an informed jury. It was dreamed up by solicitors and judges for their own financial gain. They ignore me completely, and most of their 600 or so rules are in direct conflict with both my Section 109 and Section 15A of the Acts Interpretation Act, and yet they are continually changing their rules. That evil document is based on the lie that a single judge can make orders without your consent or without a jury, just like Big Bad John, King John. Section 109.
When a law of a state is inconsistent with a law of the Commonwealth, the latter shall prevail, and the former shall, to the extent of the inconsistency, be invalid.
Remember sections 79 and 80 regarding single judges and juries? Now do you understand why they're so afraid of me, and especially juries? Your slavery today is not with whips and chains. It is much more subtle. It has crept up on you, especially over the last 50 years. You say, slavery? What slavery? Then why are you going to pay over $1 million for your $300,000 home? Who gets the extra $700,000? Why do you pay up to half your income in taxes? If you don't pay, they'll fine you or jail you. And you say you're not a slave? Please don't say that all your taxes are used to run the country. A major chunk of your tax tribute is to pay the interest on government debts to the bank. Did you know that in 1920, taxation was only 2.5%? You are slaves today to public debt, inflation, bankruptcies which can result in suicides, and foreclosures on your homes and small businesses. How would you like to buy your $300,000 home under a proper money system? The $300,000 is made up of raw materials and human effort, nothing else. Under a proper system, your home loan is really credit granted to you for your future work and production. That is, your ability to repay. Regardless of who prints the money, tickets or electronic blips on a computer, be it government or even a bank operating legally, your new home represents an increase in the national wealth, namely one house. But there is one extra human effort to include. That is the bookkeeping for that new money. Suppose you make 300 payments, so someone has to do 300 bits of work. Allow them $50 per payment. That's a total of $300 by $50, or $15,000. So the total cost of your home should not be $1 more than $315,000. And that is the amount to be created. And you agree to repay it at $1,050 per month for 300 months, or 25 years. Listen carefully. Under that proper system, there would be zero inflation. But under the current interest system, you must repay over $1 million. That, my people, is the source of all inflation, and that is your slavery. You can defeat this modern slavery by firstly reclaiming the courts. They belong to you, my people. Read my chapter 3 for the administration of justice. Don't be deceived by judges and solicitors who will try and tell you that I am not valid today. The High Court says they're lying. When you play your part to make sure this CD is widely distributed, there will be vicious reaction when you start taking banks and solicitors to court in thousands of actions for their fraud. That is, variable interest and costs orders. You can go back 6 years. Now they'll argue that if every trial is going to be by a jury, then the courts would be jammed. Not so. Did you know that when a jury trial is actually granted these days, over 90% of cases are settled out of court before the jury trial? It is solicitors who encourage the ongoing court actions. They grow fat off their incestuous system. Now you know why they desperately protect each other against anyone exposing their crimes and fraud. It's been well known that for many years there's been much abuse of the law by judges and solicitors in the Federal Magistrates Court, and it was starting to be exposed. No wonder they were anxious to abolish that court on the 5th of April 2009. Their story was that it was uneconomic. Yeah, right. Nevertheless, you can expect a lot of lies and attacks against this CD from the media. They will lie, they will distort the facts, and they will rubbish any reform as printing press money. wild inflation or whatever. Of course, notes and coins are made on printing presses. They don't grow on trees. Whatever they do, even threats of massive financial crisis, don't panic. It's not a problem, because under Section 51, your government can, in only a few weeks, restore your money system to represent the real wealth, your farms, your minerals, your homes, your transport systems, and much else. Generally, politicians are not held in the highest esteem, but they too have mortgages and children trying to buy a home or get a job. When they get to understand the solution and forget the party politics, they have access to honest experts who know how to fix the money system legally, morally, and efficiently. Governments do not have to go cap in hand to banks for finance to build roads, hospitals, or whatever. In Section 51(4), 12, and 13, they already have the power to create real money with no interest for government projects. A new road costing $10 million is an increase in the real wealth of the nation. So governments have the right and duty to create that $10 million and distribute it debt-free to pay those who worked to build the road exactly as the Nullarbor Railway was built. Imagine what just that step forward would do to reduce your rates and state taxes and stop the ridiculous and traitorous action of selling our state and national assets which belong to you. Remember, money is not a commodity. It's not wealth. It's a representation of the real wealth which is owned by you, my people. Not the banks. Now you know why they're so afraid of juries, and why they are the real force behind the push for a republic. So what can you do? When the Israelites were in slavery, Moses did more than pray about it. He confronted Pharaoh head on, and with persistence and divine help, the Israelites' slavery was ended. Note, God's miracles came after Moses took action. When Fred Hollows is presented with a blind person, he does more than just say, let's pray about it. He uses his God-given gift and operates to restore that person's sight. William Wilberforce did more than just give lectures on the evils of slavery in England. He, an honourable churchman, confronted the slave masters in the courts with juries. Proper courts with juries are the best defence of your freedom and rights. Not long ago, attempts were made to destroy your Australian flag. But the flag cried out to you. All across this great nation, more than 1 million people heard and still listen to the voice of the Australian flag via radio, TV, the internet, cassette and CD. Many heard for the first time what the design of their flag is really all about and what it stands for. Your flag, drenched with the blood of those who gave their lives for you and the freedom you have today. Many listeners wept at the thought of this wonderful part of our heritage being destroyed. It would be like abolishing Anzac. My people, you listened, you rallied. You would not let your flag be torn down or discarded. And today it is more loved and held in greater esteem and awareness than ever before. The Voice of the Australian Flag CD was copied and distributed by tens of thousands of caring people, and they squashed much of the anti-flag movement. William Wilberforce defeated the slave masters in 1807. They can be defeated today, but they will not be defeated by academic lectures in meetings, and certainly not by revolution and violence. They will be defeated in the courts with informed juries. At this very moment, as you listen to me, hundreds of people are making 10 copies each of this CD to give out freely. Give a copy of this CD personally to your local Member of Parliament, as well as the pastor and elders in whatever you call your church. They probably have a mortgage too. Do not post it. They probably won't even see it. Find a way to put it personally into their hands, and letterbox this CD in your street and theirs. Politicians will act only when they think they have voters supporting them. Remind your pastor and church elders, as William Wilberforce did, that they should not be hiding in their sanctimonious closet, desperately searching for any scripture to justify their non-involvement. Some of them probably live off interest too. They become so heavenly bound that they become no earthly good. The commandment, love thy neighbour, surely includes the responsibility of helping an oppressed neighbour. That's you. And in the public courts if need be, especially in the family court where the legal vultures feast on the carcasses of troubled marriages. Marriage vows are treated as a joke, and the last thing they want is marriage reconciliation. Why? Solicitors' fees. But if church elders did their job properly, there would be no need for Christians to go to court. Read 1 Corinthians chapter 6. They may help prevent just one of the 7 suicides each week, which can be directly related to the family court actions. When you go to court, do not go alone. Take a group of friends to witness the proceedings. It is a public court. They have every right to be there. Preachers should know me and preach about me regularly. Why? Because I am your day-to-day practical application of Bible laws on how we should live. All church leaders, regardless of denomination, are registered tax-exempt ministers, licensed by the government. They are bound by law and Almighty God to expose corruption in government and to reveal to their congregations any and every breach of your constitution. So ask your church leaders, whatever their title, why they've failed to inform the congregation of how, when, and especially why Julia Gillard, John Howard, Kim Beasley, and a host of others, including judges, have been charged with treason and are awaiting indictment by grand jury. You'll probably be told, we don't get involved in politics, or some such excuse. So remind them that this has nothing to do with politics. Church leaders are responsible to reveal any criminal offence, since they are a minister who has taken the oath of allegiance. They are responsible for the knowledge in Hosea chapter 4, and by concealing a criminal offence, they're committing a criminal offence. So ask your pastor to do a sermon on the Constitution and how the churches intend to have the illegal Uniform Civil Procedure laws abolished. The High Court declared they are illegal in 1996. Where does your church leader stand on this most important issue of moral law? I was given as a free gift to you, my children, by a wise and patient ancestry. Now it is your turn to make copies of this CD as your gift to everyone you can, in your area, in shopping centres, everywhere. Because somewhere today, there is another William Wilberforce just waiting for you to give them a copy of this CD. Through me, your wise early fathers extended practical Christianity to everyone, rich and poor. Without me, you will surely become slaves to some kind of Republican dictatorship under the international bankers. It will be worse than communist China or Russia was. No private property, no rights, no juries. Both the bankers and the judiciary want to become a republic more than anyone else. The judiciary wallow in their power. They fear and hate the rule of law, and they protect the banks who grow rich off you. I've been set in place to protect you against them and anyone who attempts a legal power over you, no matter where you live. I was born from God's holy word and wisdom that none can dispute. I am 135 wisely written instructions for the protection of your freedoms and rights. Know me well and teach your children. Cast me aside, and they will never forgive you. I can guide you, advise you, and protect you, if you let me. But there is one thing I cannot do for you. I cannot multiply myself. For that, I need you, lest you forget.